Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this Monday, April 7th Board of Supervisors regular meeting to order. Mr. Whitson is on his way to Houston and will join when he can. If we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A moment of silence. Thank you.
Just want to clarify for the record, should Mr. Whitson join us electronically, it'd be for personal reasons owing to his profession.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the agenda with the addendum item that I added, staff add, which is the proclamation for the International Dark Sky Week, which is G7.
E7.
E7.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
If that's the only addition, then I'll second that.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Bless you.
Bless you. School Superintendent Dr. Grimsley, presentation.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. Happy spring from your friends at RCPS. I apologize I could not be at your last budget work session. I was unavoidably detained driving our band students around New York City for the weekend. I was able to witness firsthand what an incredibly well-planned and organized trip this was, thanks in large part to our incredible director, Mr. Tyler Endy, with full support of the band boosters and the funding to make it happen, thanks to the community for donating and participating in the band's recent fundraisers. Students were able to experience the general touristy attractions like the Statue of Liberty, Times Square, 9/11 Memorial, Central Park, but also received an enriching opportunity to participate in a private Broadway Plus workshop with acclaimed trombonist and music professor Jennifer Horton, whose career spans decades on Broadway. Horton shared her experiences as a professional musician and also directed the students in learning one of the musical pieces from the Broadway show, The Great Gatsby, a show in which Horton herself performs as a pit member. That evening, the group attended a live performance of The Great Gatsby on Broadway. The dazzling production transported the audience to the Roaring '20s with lavish costumes, electrifying choreography, and a live score that brought F. Scott Fitzgerald's timeless story to life. On the final evening in New York City, students were able to attend a breathtaking performance at Dizzy's Club at the Lincoln Center. The all-female powerhouse diva jazz orchestra wowed the crowd with their dynamic sound and show-stopping solos, rounding out the trip with a perfect blend of education and entertainment. The trip not only deepened students' appreciation for music and theater, but also gave them a broader sense of the artistic possibilities that await beyond the classroom. This is a perfect segue into the official launch of our Fine Arts Academy, which has been discussed in our strategic planning for the last several years as part of our gifted and talented service options, as well as fulfilling a need for arts students to have a post-secondary pathway. At our school board meeting on April 8th, tomorrow evening, the Fine Arts Academy planning team will share how students will be able to earn a Fine Arts Academy designation at graduation through taking a variety of fine arts courses in music, band, art, and theater. We are very excited that this program is now formalized and planned for official applications to go out potentially next week. Further at the school board meeting, Ms. Jody Place, our assistant principal at the high school, as well as our career and technical education coordinator, and several of our CTE teachers will share important information about opportunities available to our CHS students. Contrary to what you may have heard recently, no, we are not trading in the trades for ballet at the high school. In fact, our trades offerings have expanded in important ways. We are thankful for our close partnerships with our community agencies and foundations that help to make opportunities for students happen. RAC has been instrumental in helping shape experiences that will be available for fine arts. our EMS partners in helping expand offerings to students who then contribute to Rappahannock through volunteering in our local fire and rescue companies. And I just spoke with Cat Waters last week about that, and we had 7 students sign up in 1 year to volunteer at fire rescue. So that's pretty incredible for just that 1 year. Our partnership with Laurel Ridge Community College has helped secure many additional trades opportunities for our students, like HVAC and plumbing, Drones Academy. We are fortunate that we do not have to create and fund all of these amazing opportunities alone. The Lions Club has helped offer additional funding for students wishing to take trades courses or certifications, as well as opening the door for students interested in pursuing trades in high-demand fields to access those programs. In that vein, our CPS is again partnering with the Department of Social Services for Child Abuse Prevention Month this month. Students can participate in a coloring contest and poster design contest with the theme Powered by Hope and Caring for Children Today, Tomorrow, and Forever. The winning poster and colored pinwheel artists will receive prizes and recognition. We are also thankful for our incredible PTO, who sponsored a very successful Fun Run Boosterthon last week under the theme Climbing Together to Build RAP's Future. Students enjoyed fun prizes, music, and earning pledges by participating in a thrilling obstacle course in order to reach the school goals. Both RCES and RCHS students were able to participate this year, and funds received will go towards a new climbing wall and gaga pit at RCES and improvements for the RCHS courtyard project at the high school. Thanks so much to the RCPS PTO for all the work in organizing this huge effort. And finally, Spark Camp registration is now closed, and we have filled all of our slots with 125 students signed up. We are excited to again offer this amazing opportunity for learning and growing throughout the summer months. As always, thank you so much for your continued support and advocacy for our schools. Do you have any questions for me?
Remind us what a gaga pit is, please. So it's not suddenly trending.
It is a new thing, apparently. It's like a pit with a game, and it can be set up on the playground. I'm still not super familiar, but apparently it's very popular. So
Okay. We'll be looking forward to the tour.
come on over and play some gaga with
Get
us.
it.
I don't have any questions. I'm glad to read this, that you're going to clarify some, community rumors surrounding your
Yes,
CTE
ma'am.
programs. So I'll definitely be interested in hearing that tomorrow. And as many of us at this table do, I wear several community hats. So sometimes it's hard for me to figure out which one needs to speak and which one needs to sit back. So I'm just going to state this, and you do with this information what you'd like. But I just did a quick search on jobs in the Laurel Ridge Service District, which includes Rappahannock County. And there are 62 openings right now at this very moment. It was a real-time search, 62 openings for plumbers. There are 85 openings for electricians, and those are just the 2 skilled trades that I searched. There are 4 openings for musicians. So while I appreciate all of it, I do hope that the school can strike a responsible balance between the CTE and the Fine Arts Academy. So I'll definitely be interested to hear, because I'm hearing lots of those rumors, and again, from all the different hats that I wear, so.
No, and that's an excellent point. So, and people don't know this, and this will be clarified tomorrow, but we'll get more information out too, that the Department of Education actually views the fine arts as core, part of core, with math, English, those pieces. Career and tech is very specialized, and it really depends on your surveillance of the surrounding area, regional labor market needs. So, and it's very specialized. So there's a lot to that. So you're right. Yes, we want kids to have every opportunity. And yes, I've seen trades teachers change lives. I've seen arts teachers change lives. I've seen general ed teachers change lives. We love to offer as much as we can to all students, but of course, we do have to strike a balance and make sure we're sensitive to the funding streams we have and the opportunities and the interests of students and the labor market needs. So great point, though. Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Grimsley. So just for my own edification, so I heard the same rumor, which was they're canceling welding for drama, which I was like, interesting.
No, welding was actually our #1 top interest
So
in
just so
student
that I can
interest
tell
forms,
people
yeah.
who are, and I'm like, I don't, what is there a restructure? Where are these rumors coming from? And what is it about? Do you know, not that you
yes.
know the source, but maybe you do.
Some of it I have to, be careful of how just because of internal personnel discussions that have happened. But at this time of year, we are typically looking at what ifs. Should this happen, would you be interested in adding an endorsement here, doing this? So those conversations are happening. But I feel like more of that is, the expansion of the Arts Academy is coming out, so people are questioning that with student interest forms which have gone out earlier this year than they have in the past. So we're getting a better understanding much earlier of what students are interested in, trying to map out a schedule, a master schedule, where all the endorsements lie, what are students interested in, what do the labor market analysis say, and what is possible that we can offer, knowing what may happen with our budget. So there's a lot of those what ifs, and sometimes things like that can grow legs, and when students sometimes get a hold of things and parents, and then it just kind of spirals. So we're going to try to clarify a lot of that, and all parents will get all the course requests from their child going home next week, so they'll be able to view what their students have chosen and they'll have another week after that to request any changes or ask questions or anything. So we're trying to get out way in front of it, but typically this process happens in May or later. So we're much more ahead of schedule, so I think that's what's,
Got it.
yeah.
Well, thank you. It sounds
If that helps.
exciting. It sounds like you guys had a great trip to the city.
It was incredible.
You were driving the bus in
Yes,
Manhattan?
yes, sir.
But it was an
Yellow
activity
bus.
bus or was it?
Two activity buses
Okay.
we were able to fit.
Yeah.
Thank you for your help, Chris. Mapping that out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, next we have public comment. Anyone wishing to speak, please be recognized. When you get up to the mic, please give us your name and your district. And just raise your hand if you'd like to come up.
Hello, this is Mark Anderson from the Piedmont District. If you didn't hear me last month, I'm not going to subject you to the same narrative I gave you then. I prepared a written statement on this Blue Rock Inn special exception permit issue. It's not on your agenda otherwise, and I don't intend to read it to you. Margaret Bond prepared it on it. I just tweaked it a little bit, but it's a pretty good statement of the facts. The situation as we find it now is this developer has his permits in hand. He can build any size structure he feels like, up to and including the Taj Mahal, and apparently without any interference with the special use restrictions that were on his permit. That's just a situation we're going to have to live with. And it may come out all right. It's a big property and you may not see it that well from the road. Each of these structures is 1.5 times or more the size of the original main inn, which I found interesting but not surprising in that there was no square footage limitation, there was no height restriction on the structures that were approved. This could have been done. I read through the ordinance again for special exceptions, and there's a pretty good laundry list of restrictions you can put on a particular use for additional buildings and whatnot. I think with a little bit of effort, you could prepare a checklist or a template that the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors could use for reviewing it. And without grossly extending the terms that are already in that ordinance. I would be happy to be on a committee of 3 to prepare such a document, present it to the Planning Commission, go over it with it, and get their opinions, additions, whatever, and then have it presented to you. I have people in mind for nomination, but I nominate myself for one of the 3. There's probably still more that'll need to be done about this after the fallout from this project. There will be other developers that will come here. They will attempt to build using special exceptions within agricultural zoned areas, and they need to have restrictions specifications, guardrails put on what they get to build. So hopefully that we can address this in the future. If we have to, we can amend the ordinances for special exceptions. We definitely need to work on the appeal process, in my opinion, because we, as I understand it, we ended up with an ad hoc response to the appeal that did get filed. And we should have a more regularized type of appeal process so that we don't have to go through this again. It's too hard on the staff and it's too hard on the supervisors. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Hi, I actually just wanted to introduce myself to the board. If you don't already know me, sorry. My name's Amber Montgomery. I'm out of the Piedmont District. But I actually have just been given the opportunity to become the executive director over at Headwaters, which I'm very excited about. And I just wanted to say hello and also just let you know that we're going to be working very closely with the schools, as is our mission. So our hope is to definitely support the trades, support our fine arts, all the programs that the schools are making available to our kids, which I think is really, really important. So I just wanted to formally introduce myself. So thank you.
Very nice to meet you. Thank you.
Hi, happy spring. Sheila Gressinger, Hampton District. I think I've said this before, but there was a favorite ad that I always had in the newspaper at one of my jobs, and it was, "The race belongs not merely to the swift, but to the far-seeing, those who anticipate change." And I think it's appropriate now when we're coming to a time here in our county and in our country where we're facing challenges of funding. And so another thing I used to say to my staff at the newspaper was, if you take good care of your territory, it'll take good care of you. And what I meant to them was, if you're out there hustling all the time, you will eventually be prepared for if something big drops out of your budget or your territory, you will have things upcoming in the pipeline that will mitigate that challenge to a degree. So that's something I think we need to be aware of in our own place. I do want to give a compliment to Dr. Grimsley and her team for their innovative abilities to be able to answer a lot of the challenges that they've faced during her time here in our county. I think that's to our benefit, and I think that's great. The other thing, as far as budgeting, what I'm going to address is, with our county budget, we're coming up and people are going to be talking about how much the courthouse is going to cost. At our recent Fourth Estate meeting with Rappahannock news people just recently, I came up with a really cool idea for the courthouse. And that is, why don't we pay tribute to historical figures or challenging wonderful people in our county, specific judges or lawyers or somebody who is a fantastic benefit to our county, and call it the so-and-so Memorial Courthouse, courtroom. That's the first courtroom. Then you have the ability for the Memorial John Jinks Courthouse number 2 Memorial. And then you can also have the entryway, say the Susie Sperry entry. So when people are talking, they say, go in the Sperry entry rather than one of the others. So it's a way to pay tribute to our county and then also tap into the wealth of foundations or people who want to participate and be a part, and that would help with the funding of our courthouse, which would then help our budget as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Copies of comments that I won't have time to make, and then these are talked about real quick, if you can pass them around.
Yep.
And thank you. Ron Mackler from Jackson District. Make a quick comment about the sheet I'm sending around right now, and I've been, if you're aware, I've been doing a lot of research on the fire levy situation, and this is something I found, and I just printed this off today. I've been aware of it, but anyways, there's a about a $27,000 error in the information that's on BoardDocs for the annual spending. And it may have been caught someplace else and corrected, but if not, because it's on that public document, that it needs to be straightened out. The other thing I'd like to talk about is the fire levy tax increase. From what I've found, and I've sort of scratched the surface, there's a lot in there that I've been looking at. And I honestly think that that levy can be reduced. We are spending money, fire levy money, on areas that it is not designed or meant to be spent on, and it's costing us hundreds of thousands of dollars, actually. I mean, we're, the Chester Gap and Amosville situations where they run into other counties, we are paying almost $200,000 this past year for them to run into other counties, because we pay 100% of their operating costs, but they only spend 40 or 60% of their time running in Rappahannock. So we have to look at that and deal with it. And the other thing that is an issue that we've got to be realistic about is that we're doing okay on the rescue end. But on the fire end, from what I'm seeing, we have a big problem there. I've tried to get from the county a status on basically how many firefighters do we have in each company and whatever, what are their ages, what are their qualifications, because all these are very important. Firefighting is not something that you just run in the building and you know what to do. And you don't want people that aren't familiar with what's supposed to actually happen doing that. And we've been fortunate that nobody's ever gotten hurt at this point. But it's real. And as near as I can figure, if we have 20 firefighters that are qualified interior firefighters for the county, I'd be surprised, because we just don't have people the right ages anymore. There may be people that have certification, but 57 years old is pretty much the cutoff point for any kind of an active firefighter. So we've got, if we've got people that are in their 60s and 70s that have certification, that's fine, but they just can't do the job anymore. So we need to get this status, which is being worked on, I guess. Darren's working on it. And it should be, I should have been able to get copies of previous status reports, but I asked for them and have received no information. So, because I can look at them because of my background or whatever and figure out, because you can't just send an engine to a fire, and if everybody that jumps off has got a red helmet on, that means they can't interior firefight. And so, where the county is right now, if your house catches on fire, there's a good chance that it's probably going to be lost. So I think we really need to look at this and seriously look at it, and seriously look at reorganizing how we do it in the county, because 10 years ago when we got that report, there was a very good solution in there. It's been ignored for 10 years, and we need to pull that thing back off the shelf, because that's where the answer is. We got to go to centralized administration and some kind of centralized operations, particularly on the fire end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
Elgin Spring. Anita Ramos, Hampton District. I was reading what we're doing today like at 3 o'clock in the morning, so pardon me if I'm rattling on, I'm trying not to. One thing, I've just heard about the arts program at the school. I'm very glad for that. I was choir for 4 years in high school, took art classes, was a thespian, ran around with a great bunch of people who I still know. And that was all because of being in the arts. And also went to school with 2 people that ended up on Broadway. So anyway, The other thing I'll throw in right now is E6, which is a resolution on water supply. As some of you know, my husband and a group of other people were very active on writing up a paper on the water situation here in Rappahannock many years ago. And I hope that that will be a springboard for us to help out. That is still, I believe, on BoardDocs. But it was very interesting at the time, and considering the drought conditions we had last summer and have started out with this year, it's more and more important to think about our water supply. So I'm glad that the Regional Commission is getting involved in this kind of thing. And the state is interested. Wow, what a surprise. There's two things coming up today, which are about tourist home zoning and temporary mobile home permits. I'm very glad to see that this is going to go bounce to the Planning Commission, because I think they can spend some good time with it. And I hope that something good will come out of them. I wanted to make a couple of comments about them. The term travel trailer and mobile homes gets confused with each other, so I went on Google. Manufactured home. The proper term for a mobile home is a manufactured home. Terms like a trailer, trailer park, or even mobile home are no longer politically correct. But the public has been slow to adapt the proper term, manufactured home. That's a difference between that and a recreational vehicle. And so we need to get those apart. The old term mobile home, by the way, technically refers to factory-built houses built before the HUD Code of 1976. And I heard the quote in Google was, terms are mixed all the time. So let's get those kind of things straight. The other thing about that is the tourist home zoning, and I think we need to look real hard at that. I do not want someone to have a permanent apartment and then put in a tourist home below it and then turn that into a permanent home, and suddenly you have a duplex. So I'll just leave it like that for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anita.
Yes, ma'am.
Diane Bruce, Berryville. I don't know Mr. Allen, but I was motivated by his conversation a few minutes ago about what's happening over at Blue Rock and in that whole area. You know, I've been here before talking about this, and because of my years involved, long since gone, the owners of those two properties, Clark Lane and Blue Rock, have been told, owner after owner after owner, now you will not be able to do that. No, you can't do that. Well, both of those places have enlarged every time they come in and want something. They've maybe had to fight a little bit, but Clark Lane is still not resolved and Blue Rock isn't either. I think that we have to stop caving. We have to stop making exceptions for everything. We just can't keep giving away approvals of things that are not permitted and that we don't want. The exceptions for special permits is just overwhelming. I can't believe what I keep seeing in the newspaper every week or every month. We're just weakening our zoning requirements. We're giving builders and developers the opportunity to come in because we make so many exceptions that they're going to say, well, you did it for them and you did it for them. And that's what's happening. That's what's been happening. So I hope you'll strengthen your backs and start fighting back. I noticed that there's a for sale sign on the piece of real estate kind of across from the co-op. And I want to think that I remember when the Planning Commission, somebody was working on the zoning, there was a straight line drawn back in the woods. It's not identified by anything as commercial. You know, that whole area, that's our commercial area in the county. And it's where the bank is, it's where the schools are. And that area of woods, that the distant line to the back, I don't believe was identified by any kind of survey or other marker. So who knows how deep the commercial district goes in the woods. So I hope that you'll start taking all of these requests and applications more seriously, because that's not who we want to be. We want to be friendly, we want to be cooperative, but we want to be Rappahannock County. The other thing I'd like to mention has to do with the courthouse. And I think the courthouse is beautiful from the outside. I think the inside is not well designed, but I know that restrictions on handicap and security impact it a lot. But if it's a $30 million budget, I have been told, and this may not be correct, but I have been told that that would be the equivalent of about an 11-cent increase in the tax rate. That's a lot. Now, that may be wrong, but why can't we get it down to a $20 million building? I think that there are things there that you can eliminate. Of course, the Sally Port, the underground parking for the judges. On the second floor, I would say remove the second courtroom. If you look at the second floor, there's a red line kind of in the middle, and I think that's designed for holding prisoners. Everything below that, just take it out. That's the second courtroom. That's bathrooms, that's chambers, that's waiting rooms, that's jury rooms. You have one courtroom, just stick with one courtroom. That space can be left open. You may want to build a second courtroom in there someday, but you could possibly reduce the budget by eliminating that. On the first floor, I think it's possible to remove everything that's pale green. This may not be popular, but it is the circuit court area, the circuit court clerk's office. I don't know how many days a week the circuit court has trials or cases over here, but probably not more than 5 or 6 a month. So they'd have to bring their documents over, which of course are all electronic now, to the courthouse 5 or 6 times, maybe. Just take it out. And it can be put in there later on, if needed. The other thing is you have other expenses other than just this courthouse that's $30 million. We want to keep this building from falling down and perhaps have offices below it. The commissioner's office, the treasurer's office, and I don't know what you all are doing at the jail, but you're doing something at the jail, I think, or will be. That's more millions that we're looking at. So it seems to me that we need to cut back. What we need and what we want are 2 entirely different things. And I don't think we need all of that facility at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Diane.
Diane.
Thank you.
All right, not seeing any other hands in the courtroom. We do have a few people on Zoom. Anyone wishing to speak, please raise your Zoom hand so you can be recognized and unmuted. All right, not seeing any hands raised, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Moving on to consent agenda.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to adopt the consent agenda as amended.
We have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you. Going into appointments, fire and rescue chiefs.
Internet is being slow. There we go. There you go. As I shared in the earlier meetings, the Public Safety Committee modified their rules of procedure adjusting how the chief's representative would be selected. That document now includes a recommendation from the fire and rescue community to the board for chief's committee representative. I've been told by the association president, Jack Atkins, that they have decided to select Chief Bobby Smoot as their recommended representative. And he had said they decided to start with company one and rotate. So that recommendation is before the board. If the board would like to make an appointment to this body, you can do that.
That's a great recommendation and a smart way to move that service around. Of course, Company 1 is in Mr. Whitson's district, and he's not here today. Chief Smoot does live in Piedmont District. So if it would please the board, I would go ahead and nominate Chief Bobby Smoot, the Chief of Company 1, to serve as the first representative chief to the Public Safety Committee.
I will second.
And many thanks for his continued willingness to serve. I think he's on the fire levy too, still?
No, JB took his spot.
Okay, good.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No opposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby.
Yes.
Many, many thanks.
All right, you have an upcoming vacancy on the Planning Commission for the Wakefield District. Mr. Schulin is serving in that position right now. He has submitted an application seeking reappointment. That position comes up to an end on May 1st, so this would be an appropriate meeting to make that appointment. If the board is disinclined to do that, then we'll advertise and you would make an appointment at the May meeting.
I would like to make that motion that we reappoint Mr. Schulin to the Rappahannock County Planning Commission for a term representing the Wakefield District starting May 1st, 2025 and ending May 1st, 2029, and waive all informalities with the appointment process.
I would enthusiastically second that motion and just state that Mr. Schulin is always amazingly prepared. Maybe not at the April meeting because he works in taxes. That's a tough time for him. But he is always very well prepared with the materials and always brings good questions and discussions, and always in good humor, which is wonderful. And especially being in a year where we're reviewing the comprehensive plan, he is a great asset to the Planning Commission.
Right. Great words. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Blue Ridge Committee.
Last one. There's a Blue Ridge Committee for Shenandoah Park Relations that was developed a number of years, I think leading up to their 75th anniversary. This group, it can include 3 representatives from our community. Right now, those are myself, Supervisor Smith, and Teresa Wood, with Bonnie Jewell acting as an alternate. Teresa Wood, as you're aware, was leading the Business of Rappahannock group. She's since transitioned out of that and is largely out of the area. We reached out to Business of Rappahannock to see if they had any recommendations for appointment. They recommended Emily Harris, who submitted an application, and that application is before you for potential appointment of one of these 3 positions. This body meets twice a year.
And the purpose of this body is essentially to discuss and find a common ground for the challenges shared by counties that adjoin the national park. So it can be anything from, what do you do with tourist home applications because they seem to be everywhere? Or how do you handle traffic? Or what does your tourism promotion look like? So I do think that business is an important part of it, but it's not the only component. And I feel like we would be a good team. And to that end, I would go ahead and nominate Emily Harris to serve as the representative on the Blue Ridge Heritage Committee. And when does that end?
Well, I'd like to say it's a life sentence.
Oh, well, I'm on that too, gosh. For as long as she is willing to serve, with many thanks for her willingness to take it on.
I'll second that appointment.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I think she is involved with the Park Trust too, isn't she?
I believe so,
She
yes.
fundraiser or something. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Thank you, Emily.
Okay.
Courthouse project continued.
It's been the board's interest to have an update from Glavine Homes at each one of your regular meetings. They are not available today for an update, but since your March meeting, they have been working on the revised concept that is responsive to the recommendations of the board and the Planning Oversight Committee from that meeting, that essentially reduced the second courtroom to being non-jury capable, eliminating the jury assembly room in favor of a combined jury assembly, jury deliberation suite for the remaining jury-capable courtroom, and then running out two scenarios, one that provided for inside secure parking, one that didn't. They are very nearly done with those concepts and the cost estimates from a third party, Downey & Scott, but not quite yet. They are planning to present to the Planning Oversight Committee this week. We were trying to pull together a meeting with the Board of Supervisors the following week, but schedules are not allowing that to happen. It's looking like that meeting is going to be in the second week of May. So more to come on that. I can take any questions, but I don't really know any of the details about the concept, so.
And I hate to circle back on this, I know we've discussed it as a board, but I still feel like that building doesn't look like any other building in the county. And if you all are okay with that, that is what it is. But we don't have any other building that has that facade on it. And I wonder if we could have a facade that is more in the style, still a proper Jeffersonian facade, but in the style of architecture we already see present in the county. And maybe, I mean, to have brickwork and columns, I just can't imagine that there's not a less expensive, equally appealing facade. That would be more Rappahannock. That's a Charlottesville facade on that building. And I like Charlottesville, but that building doesn't look like any other building in this county.
Any other discussion?
I think there's a lot to talk about, but I feel like we can just talk about that in a couple weeks, I feel like. There's a lot to talk about.
I know.
There's so much.
Believe me, I know.
Yep.
I was on the building committee before we all took this up as a board, so I know the devil's in the details.
I'll just say that the facade, that the skin on the outside of this box is very malleable well into the design process. So if a concept is selected by the board, does it not necessarily lock you into the presently presented facade.
Understood. The other thing I've heard a lot about is the parking, because I think people anticipate that we will have a situation that we currently don't on Gay Street, which is we could have court dates the same day we have supervisor meetings. And what happens when all of those people are trying to park at the same time if there is an item of great interest on the agenda? And I know that was poo-pooed by the architect and said I sounded like I wanted a garage building when nothing could be further from the truth. I just want people to have a place to park when they need to come for court or want to have their voices heard in a public hearing.
All right. Thank you, and stay tuned till May is what I'm hearing. Okay. New commercial activity and related matters is typically Mr. Whitson. Do we have anything?
I'm not aware of, didn't provide anything to me.
Okay. Regional fiber to the home broadband project discussion.
This is a request, Ms. Smith, to have this on every meeting. I know the board is waiting to see if All Points will make good on their commitment to have physical construction starting this summer, so we'll be looking for that. I can say that I was in town of Washington last week, and there was a gentleman out taking the photographs of the power poles with you saw the presentation with the little post in front of it to get a scale and everything. And first I didn't see that. I just saw him look like he was surveying, asked him what he was doing. I thought it was a VDOT person, and it was person working for All Points, so that was encouraging.
I seem to recall they should know something late this summer, so I don't see any harm. In fact, I'd kind of like to see our broadband authority maybe schedule a meeting for the June time frame. Because I think it's important we have a couple of people on that broadband authority who have much to add, so I think we should hear from them. And then kind of an unofficial update. I happen to be within earshot of someone calling the school inquiring about our fiber students, and they were from All Points Broadband. So they're looking for folks in our area. That's a good sign.
Get them taught quickly.
What's that?
Get them taught quickly.
We did. We're in second cohort right now.
Excellent. So that would be June 16th. Typically, we meet the third Monday of the month.
And
Sounds
then,
good.
I know we had recently gotten an update on the funds still in the broadband pot, which I think was 90,000 and change. Is there a reason that we still have those funds in that?
Right, if you recall, at the very beginning of the process, the board received a donation from a citizen, a matching donation from PATH, and then a matching donation from the Board of Supervisors. That totaled $150,000. Those $150,000 have paid for various things, legal support, website, and they're available to do that. The Broadband Authority's treasurer, Debbie Nick, suggested to me last week that she was going to transfer some of that into a higher interest earning account, which makes perfect sense. I think she's going to do that, and I let her know that I was not aware of any near-term large expenditures that would, change that thinking.
I just think about how much time I know staff has dedicated and expended on this project. Is there a way to use some of those funds to offset the expense that the county has incurred in terms of our oversight of the project? Basically, I know you've worked on this a lot, Gary, and is there a way to get them to use that for part of your salary?
Yeah, I would want to go back and look at the representations made to the parties that made the donation.
Right.
And I don't recall whether there was what the representation was.
I think we should look at that because that's a substantial amount of funding still sitting there. And at this point, it's either going to happen or it won't. And I don't think we need further legal representation at this point, or if we do, we could leave some of it out there. But that's a substantial bucket.
Can bring that up to the Broadband Authority meeting.
That's what I was saying, a great topic for your next meeting.
Yep.
And then on the same vein, when the schools put funding into the project, the bucket that you pulled, I think, was the ESSER bucket as well, right? So if the project is a no-go and those funds return to us, are you able to buy buses with that money?
So the way that worked was because it was the potentiality of the project and construction and the agreements were in place with the region, so it is basically no longer ESSER strings attached money. It's for the broadband project, and it's reimbursed already through expended to the county. So it can be used for whatever it needs to be used.
But ESSER funds can be spent on buses, right? So if anybody ever came back around and said, what did you end up doing with that money? You can say,
Our last bus we purchased was one. So yes.
But you're saying that you've already accounted for the ESSER
It's
funds?
accounted for,
Yeah.
it's reimbursed.
So this money-
There's no more
it's
ESSER.
been cleaned.
It's been clean. So if it comes back to us, I'm assuming you might want the money back for whatever purposes. Yeah.
All right. Moving into the VDOT secondary six-year plan.
Yeah, I'll just give an introduction here. Every year, the board works through a six-year secondary road plan program. There's funding that is available from VDOT that can be allocated at the discretion of the Board of Supervisors, and most of that money is to put hard surface gravel roads. Here recently, they're working on some guidelines that would potentially allow you to upgrade gravel roads so they remain gravel, but you have enough in the other category that it's probably your priority. It's not very much money. And so road projects are generally fairly expensive. And so the way VDOT, the VDOT process works is the board puts together a priority list that runs out 6 years, hence the name of the program. So last year, the Board of Supervisors pulled together a priority list of several roads, which are shown on the screen, which are Kaiser Run Road, which is partially completed road, will be finished up possibly this spring and maybe into the summer. Horton Hollow Road, which is an extension from the paved side back towards the Thornton River. Pullen's Bluff Road, which is its full length between the two, Kaiser Run and Gid Brown Hollow. Turkey Ridge Road, which is an extension from the project that ended in Culpeper, which is O'Bannon's Mill, and 0.8 miles into the county. Sycamore Ridge Road, which is its full length between Swindler Hollow and Old Hollow. And then last year, the board added Castleton View Road, which was a stretch in the middle that was unpaved, and that would make the whole section hard surface. Last year, you heard during the public hearing from some individuals on Castle Mountain Road about the condition of their road. And historically, there's been a potential interest in extending the Turkey Ridge Road to go further down Turkey Ridge to the point where there's a bridge in a sharp corner. So the purpose of this meeting today is to determine whether the board is inclined to hold a public hearing in May to add another road onto the end of the 6-year plan, or possibly change any of these priorities, which the near-term ones really can't be changed because design and engineering has already started. Staff has identified those two roads, Turkey Ridge Road and Castle Mountain Road, as potential candidates. However, the cost of them, $560,000, $480,000, vastly exceeds the amount of money you have available to allocate in year 6, which is only $170,000. So if you can add a road to the end of the plan and have it be partially unfunded, and you then, the board the next year could then finish funding with whatever money is available that next year. And it might take a year or two or not to build up enough money to cover that next project. VDOT requires a public hearing once every 2 years. You did have a public hearing and you adopted the priority list as shown on the screen of the roads that I mentioned last year. So you do not have to have a public hearing this year. And that's actually my recommendation because you can't complete that road in the 6th year. It's going to be the 7th year anyway. It might make sense to allow more money to come forward. That said, there's nothing, there's no problem with having a public hearing. And what we typically do is place those roadside signs up to alert people in the area that you're considering a certain section of road. We put a notice in the newspaper, and then those folks can come in and tell you whether they do want it hard surfaced or don't want it hard surfaced. One of the concerns I have is that it's already 6 years out that this project is going to likely be added to the list, and because of the limited funding, it's going to be 7 years out, and so you're building an expectation with a sign that is just not going to come due for a very long time.
Do the funding, do they get attached per year and you can't move the funding around? So if
No,
we were-
no.
Sorry, you're predicting my question.
Yeah, so the money will cascade along with the project. So if Kaiser Run gets done and there's money left on that project, it'll trickle down to the other projects. And that schedule shifts around over time. And by the time year 6 comes around, it won't be 170 left. It'll be some different number.
But money that's added in the future, can it be proactively used for things that are on the list?
It cannot come forward, but
It cannot come forward, that's
yeah,
my question.
Yeah, so the year 6 money
So
will
that's why
not be
you're
available
suggesting
until year 6.
wait.
Yeah.
I see.
And we are just, VDOT is estimating what year 6, what all the years funding is going to be based on, all the information they have available to them. They're only estimates on those revenues. And so they're probably close, but it doesn't really matter until we're looking at those projects that are going to be done next year. And then we have a pretty good idea what their funding is going to be and that they're fully funded and they're going to happen. And then every year, we just kind of push out that 6-year window.
Well, the board has been very kind to Stonewall Hawthorne. We have 3 roads on here, Horton Hollow, Turkey Ridge Road, and Castleton View. And I really appreciate the board agreeing to put Castleton View Road on there last year because Company 5 was really, really lobbying for that. It's just kind of really hard on your ambulances. So anyway, I just wanted to, I know I thanked you last year, but I just wanted to thank you guys again for doing that. But what you're saying makes a lot of sense. I do have very, very vocal people on Turkey Ridge and Castle Mountain who would be thrilled to see this done, but,
And the Turkey Ridge,
The
that
170,000.
first section is going to happen, and then there'll be a little break because of other work. And so those folks will be able to see the impact from that project and then decide whether they really want the next section done or not.
But I also understand if somebody else wants to put a road from their district on there. But I think that your suggestion is wise and that waiting till we have funding to actually complete a project might make more sense, at least for me. I can't speak for anybody else.
Piedmont and Stonewall Hawthorne tend to have the most roads.
Yes, we're in
Wakefield
the same
has
boat.
several, but they're generally disinclined to have them hard surfaced.
I would be unelected.
I think Hampton District is the one district that we had 20 people show up to say, take my road off
That's
the
right.
list one year. So
That'll run? Yep.
I'm not going to put that road back on there.
So really, the direction we need here at this meeting is, do you want a public hearing advertised? And if so, which roads would you like included in that public hearing?
With these funds, do you think we'll have an option soon to pivot any of this funding to gravel road maintenance? I know that's something that's been in the works, and is it an option to maybe not do so much of this and do more of
Yeah.
that?
Well, not gravel road maintenance per se, but it would be gravel road upgrades. And so it'd be minor alignment changes, maybe ditching, culverts, things like that. Probably everything that the project does now, and just not put the chip seal surface on the top. But those guidelines are still being worked on, and that was a bill that came out of Loudoun County who have many gravel roads they just didn't want hard surfaced.
I think that's going to be a great initiative for our county, and I would love to bank this money for a year and not advertise a public hearing.
Totally agree.
And that would basically have the effect of having last year's resolution just be on the books for another year for VDOT and other purposes.
Sounds good.
Is that a motion?
I think that would be great if there was a motion.
Yes.
To not advertise?
Yeah, I put an option there, but not to hold
I'll
a
make a
public
motion.
hearing for, yeah.
Yeah, to not hold a SSYP public hearing in FY 2026, retaining the validity of the resolution adopted in FY 2025.
And I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Draft general fund
Oh.
balance.
So this is the discussion
Jewel
that we
gonna
waited to
jump us
have
up?
with
Yes.
Kier. And Kier's not here.
Well,
That's right. Okay, so, excuse me, I have drafted this in the most direct and shortest way I could possibly think of it. So the Governmental Accounting Standards Board is the standard-setting board by which all governments do their accounting, just as the name implies. And so that body prescribes the various categories of fund balance. And if you gave any attention to the fund balance page that's within our annual financial report, and this is a hard copy version of that, these terms are already there and are probably generally familiar to you. So the categories are non-spendable, that's just what it says it is. It's things like inventories or prepaid expenditures that are actually assets to the county at the time of the close of the fiscal year, or things that are legally or contractually not able to be spent. So things like endowment funds. The general fund doesn't have such a thing as that, but the library fund does. And so under the library fund on this page, you will see something called Corpus of Permanent Fund. That's an endowment, and it is non-spendable. The second category is restricted, and those are generally things like grants that are there, or things maybe like any balance in the 4 for Life, state funding for EMS service, or the fire programs, if we ever had a balance remaining in those state funds, that would fall within the restricted category. Committed are funds that are generally reserved by this board for certain things. So within the fund balance at the close of fiscal '24, the capital projects was the largest portion of the committed fund balance, and that was $1.7 million for projects specifically budgeted by the board. Assigned funds then are the next category, lower than committed, and those are things like your future use of the fund balance in the adopted budget. So right now, the board is considering in next year's budget, $437,000 use of the fund balance. If that's adopted as part of the fiscal '25 budget, it will show up within this fund balance accounting as an assignment of the fund balance. And then finally, anything that doesn't fall into one of those previous 4 categories, that's unassigned. And what I'm recommending as part of the fund balance policy is that within that unassigned balance, the board reserve a liquidity reserve that's equal to 12% of general fund revenue plus school operating fund revenue. And that really is because you need that money there in the fund balance for cash flow purposes. Taxes are collected only once a year in December. This reserve would be calculated and reserved every June 30th. So that reserve really is what's the cash that you need in the fund balance at June 30th to get you until December 5th. What is that? And so I have looked at what that amount has been fiscal 20 all the way to fiscal 24. It ranges from 10% to 12%. I am recommending here that the board set aside within its unassigned fund balance policy 12%. In addition to that, I am recommending that within the unassigned fund balance, there be an item called the Budget Stabilization Reserve. And that's really meant to not as an intentional budget balancing source when the board initially adopts the budget, but it's meant to be there if there are severe revenue declines during the course of a fiscal year, if our revenue actual receipts are drastically varying from what our projections were when the budget was adopted, any sort of emergency expenditure that the board should need to pursue during the course of a fiscal year, or non-emergency expenditures resulting from economic stress placed on the budget. I am also recommending that budget stabilization reserve be equal to the greater of $2 million or 5%. The 5%, if it's calculated now, equates to $1.3 million. $1.3 million. And so 5% as the county progresses through time and budgets invariably or inevitably expand, that 5% will ultimately become $2 million. But as it is now, it's 1.3. I tend to be very fiscally conservative and mindful of the fact that no matter what your budget is, certain things cost what they cost. And it may be more than that 5%. These two things combined, the 12% liquidity reserve and the 5% or $2 million budget stabilization reserve, when they're calculated on those percentages, is 17% of the combined general fund and school operating fund revenues. The Government Finance Officers Association, which is the best practice setting board for public budget and public finance, recommends at least 2 months of expenditures are set aside, and that is about 17% of the budget. So these two things combined is generally aligned with that 17%. So within this packet, that was a lot of words I just said, but within this packet is, I think it's the third page of, that's it, Gary, thank you. So this is kind of my geometry proof of how I came up with these numbers. At the top, those are fiscal years 20 through 2024 that I said I looked at to see what did we need in cash between June 30th and the next December when taxes are collected. And there on the far right, you can see that that has ranged from 10% in fiscal 22 and 24 up to 12% in fiscal 23. Ultimately, I arrived at the 12%. And then down below that solid black line, I wanted to look at what would this have meant if this policy had been in place at the close of fiscals 23 and 24. What would this have meant to that end of year fund balance? If you scroll down a little bit more, Gary, please.
What do you want?
Go up so I can see the numbers just above that and the graph. Thank you. So all of these numbers, unspendable, restricted, committed, assigned, if you look at this page in the annual audit, you will see those exact numbers. There's no changes there. But then the unassigned, it would have broken down, that the same total that's here would have broken down between liquidity reserve, budget stabilization reserve, and then ultimately the unassigned amount. And you can see how those, how that total unassigned would have broken down. And then I did receive a question about the note box that's off to the right there. Thank you. What did that note really mean? So I was trying to relay to the board that of that $3.57 million that's down there in the unassigned, this number here. Of that amount that remained at the end of fiscal 24, $449,000 has already been budgeted during the course of fiscal 25 for use on life packs and the RCES generator. Also, of that $3.5 million that was remaining at the close of fiscal 24, the board is considering using $437,000 as part of the advertised budget for fiscal 26. So when those two items are removed from that $3.575 million, $2.7 million is the balance of the unassigned. So the board at some point, as we start talking about the courthouse and borrowing for the courthouse, needs to determine how much of that remaining $2.7 million can be, should be, might be used as cash towards that project. And so I'm letting you know here that the debt service on $2.7 million over 20 years is $198,000 a year, about equivalent to 1 penny on the real estate tax rate. Over 30 years is $156,000. So that's something the board will need to consider. And then the graphs below are just graphical representation of the numbers that are there.
So the obvious unsaid thing is generally you get to spend the unassigned fund balance, those dollars, on one thing.
Yes.
And you have to your job is to figure out what is the most important thing to spend that cash on, as opposed to waiting for future revenue or waiting or using a bonding capacity to borrow money. And so trying to balance those things out. When is the right time to use your cash? And the board has used it quite a bit over the last 7 years, at least, that I can vouch for. And this value has increased a lot over those years, and largely because of the huge federal programs that we've seen come through. When you look at the treasurer's report now, you'll see that the cash balance, which is a proxy for fund balance, is retracing itself annually, which pretty much means you're spending what you budget forecast and revenue and expenditures are about lined up with what you planned, and you're not adding any more to the savings account. It's just staying the same. And so the days of being able to spend a lot out of the fund balance because you're predictably adding to it are kind of drawing to an end. Which makes your decision-making that much more critical on what do you use those dollars for.
And you're, sorry, so did you say that the reason that we've been able to save this is because of federal funds?
The reason it increased has a lot to do with the federal funding, CARES Act, ARPA, that came through.
That
and
allowed
we're
us to
flexible
offset.
enough to do different things and have helped. Other things that have done it, sales tax vastly exceeding projections after the state law changed allowing sales tax on online goods.
Yeah.
But those are all baked in now, and we're not seeing those huge increases anymore. Now, there could be another change in a future year. For example, sales tax on services has been a subject at the state, whether it might be added or not, and then that'll be we might not be able to forecast that well, and we may under forecast that. You might get a shot in the arm for 1 year, but after that, we'll probably be able to get our arms around how to forecast that.
I'm very thankful that you went through this process and explained it to all of us. I think we have to do something to be fiscally responsible for the citizens of this county. I am wondering, it wasn't that long ago where each year we had to have a line of credit. When did that end?
So that was 2015-16 definitely occurred. I can't tell you before then, how many years before then, but I believe 17 we did not have to, and definitely I've been fortunate that the years since I've been here, we've pulled out of that. You've pulled out of that. And for all the reasons we just talked about.
I started the same day as Gary.
Yeah, it's actually, Ms. Smith and I are the
My
reason
story is,
why.
I'm sticking with his story.
Yeah.
So, Ms. Joel, so is the 3.1 million, the liquidity number, that carries us from July 1 to December? Is that what you're saying? Does that capture those costs during that period?
Yes, that's the equivalent of that, yes.
And that's for that snapshot of 2024?
Yes, yes. So the way that I am proposing that this be calculated is at June 30th of each year, we look at 12% of the ensuing year's general fund and school operating fund expenses. I think I previously said revenue, it's expenses.
Yes. And then the budget stability rainy day fund?
Yes, 5%. 5% of the same base.
And that would be something as a policy we would just revisit whether that needs to be 5% or 2.5 million or 5 million as the county moves forward. That number can.
Yes,
The
you
$2
can
million
change
number.
that. Yes, the 2 million is the floor in my mind and in this recommendation. And then as you move forward in time, at some point, that 5% is going to equal more than the $2 million. And the board can either be satisfied with that, or you can change the policy to something else.
And so the policy,
Okay.
which would be your policy, would suggest that the board
gotcha.
would, if you're going to need to use this before,
Yeah.
due to some unforeseen reason, that you're going to commit to replenish it within the next 3 fiscal years. Otherwise, it needs to be there for unforeseen situations. You use it, and then you can foresee that you need to replenish it so it is available the next time, which can make for very difficult political decisions.
So let me know if this sounds right. So basically since 2015, 2016, the reason that we're here is not necessarily that we've just been collecting taxes consistently without any other external inputs and then just growing a fund. It's really because of lots of factors coming together that put us in this positive position.
Right.
That we can now not expect to increase necessarily. That's what you said, correct?
This only increases when revenue exceeds expectations.
Yeah.
Or expenses underperform, or some combination of those. And, year after year, we get pretty good at forecasting revenues, sales tax and things like that. They get pretty steady until there's a weird change in the dynamic like was for sales tax.
Yeah.
But real estate tax, most of these revenue sources are pretty, we can't forecast them with precision, but decent accuracy, right?
Absolutely.
And so it's unlikely that we're going to see large misses on revenue, over what we expect. And for expenses, things are getting pretty well dialed in. And there's not a lot in the budget where we're leaving it unspent at the end of the year. And so that's the other way to add to it. Now legally, we don't overspend the appropriation. So
Right.
you're going to add to that fund balance every year. It might be $2 or maybe $200,000, but we're not going to overspend. We know that. But we might come to you during the year and say, hey, we've got a problem, or we've got an opportunity for a generator or this or that, and ask for a commitment of fund balance, which is this unassigned part, and that's going to drive that number down over time.
Scroll back up real quick. So is there anything actionable that we should be doing, moving forward with this? Are we going to adopt a policy? What is your recommendation?
So yes, not at this meeting, because we wanted this meeting to be introduction of the policy and discussion of the policy. But at your next meeting, it would be ideal if the board could take a look at adopting this.
Got it.
Yeah, and critical in this, and we thought relative to today, this is an important discussion to have before you discuss buses. So what is it that you have in the savings account that is not already spoken for and that you have at your disposal to assign to anything that you think is important? And that's the little box that Bonnie put together, about 2.7 million. Well, that's a lot of money until you begin to talk about courthouses and what they cost to design and put furnishings in and all of those things, not to mention you're going to borrow for it. And the cost of buses and all of this. So we wanted you to see that number before getting into some of those discussions. We won't be ready to discuss courthouse numbers for a little while. You've seen numbers in the concepts. And before long, you'll see numbers for what the full design will cost. And then you'll really have to compare and contrast what makes sense to use cash for, what makes sense to borrow for, what makes sense to wait for, and prioritize those.
Well, what I think is incredible is the fact that you hit that 17%, which was that best practices number, and we're positive. That's amazing. That's great. Because I would imagine there's localities in the Commonwealth that would look at that number and not be positive, potentially.
That is true. There
We
are
were
those
there.
that have to, as part of their budget process, plan for adding to the fund balance
Exactly.
to be able to meet their policies.
We were one of those
So thank you.
localities several years ago, for sure.
Yeah, well, so because you
It
guys
can
got on
happen
board.
That's
very
right.
quickly, and I thank Ms. Jewell for putting this together for us. I think since maybe my second year on this board, I've wanted a finance committee and a finance policy, and I think it's important. Of course, I'm just going to say the opposite now, which is that whatever the board does with the vote, it can turn around and undo later. So it's great guidance, great plan. It requires great follow through and for people to stick to and do what they said they'll do.
I appreciate this. I like this a lot, especially when you think there are five different districts and all may have different ideas of what is important and most urgent at that time. I don't think anyone can argue that we have some very large projects ahead of us, so I appreciate you pulling this into focus for us.
Just as a question, how many years did you go back? I see on the bottom under the solid line, FY23 and FY24. Did you go back further than that?
I did not on that breakdown because fiscal '23 was the first year that we had this level of breakdown of the fund balance in the audit.
Oh, I see.
And so I'm not able to pull apart prior audits this way.
Thank you so much for doing this.
And we know
You're
what that
welcome.
coincides
Yeah.
with, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms.
Thank
Jewell.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you.
Thanks for getting this going.
All right. Thank you for sticking around.
So that is a wonderful segue into the school bus discussion that the board had at some of your work sessions. And at that time, I believe there was some discussions from the superintendent that we were 4 buses behind. However, maybe that's 3 buses if we can shrink the number of routes. But then I would add caution that if the number of routes increases, then all of a sudden you're behind another bus. And all this is linked to a reasonable 15-year usage for a bus. We have about 15 routes. And so if we have the wherewithal to fund a bus a year, then we can get into a cycle where it's just, we're never multiple buses behind. There have been some tight budgets, and so I think we are behind. The board also discussed during our budget meetings that there was a tax sale a couple of years ago that is likely to free up $160,000 or so in the current fiscal year that is unforeseen in the budget and would add to the fund balance. I think it's in there. It's into the numbers that Bonnie already noted. No, it's not. Look at that. Free money.
That was fiscal '24.
Okay, good. Yeah.
When would these dollars be realized?
There's a holding period, and so if, I think it was October?
2 years,
Yeah.
no, it was like May or June.
Okay, so, yeah, it's likely that, deadlines do cause people to come out, but they haven't come out yet to claim. And this happens when properties get very fractured with multiple owners over multiple generations, and there's just nobody left that really knows that they own the property. And they hence don't pay the taxes. And then the property gets sold, the taxes get paid, and anything else gets held for a couple of years, allowing those folks to come forward. So at any rate, you will have an influx of about $160,000 of one-time money, which pairs well with a one-time expense, which might help you catch up on something more than a bus a year. Dr. Grimsley did pull together information recently. There were discussions during the work sessions that a bus might be about 165. It's actually a little less than that. And don't recall from that email what the new numbers are, but I'm sure somebody else's.
152 for 77 passenger and 146 for 65.
And so there's a little bit of discussion in email with Dr. Grimsley and county staff regarding the 65 passenger buses, which is primarily what they have, and then the potential to purchase a 77 passenger bus, which people might kind of off the bat say, well, why do we need a bigger bus? I see empty buses all the time. And the cost differential is not a lot, and what it might allow them to do is consolidate 2 routes into one, as long as the students are concentrated in an area where they aren't having to be on a bus for an hour and a half to gather.
So it gives you additional capacity if I may, sorry.
Come up.
Why don't you come up? Yep.
And I brought Chris King from the bus garage with me in case you have any more very technical questions about mechanics and wear and tear and things. So he's here with me. But yeah, the 77 passenger discussion at first was sort of a non-starter for us just because the differential was quite a bit on the cost when we initially were pricing those out. However, they came in really close on the margin. So if it's only several thousand more for the added capacity of another 12, 15 students, that can really make a difference in consolidation. So that's something they had brought up as a recommendation. And we also have one of our 77 passengers. We only have 5 on our fleet. One is on the list to be replaced in 2025 anyway. So we would be down a 77 passenger. So it made good sense if we were doing to maybe go ahead and purchase a 77 passenger, but 65 has been our general replacement.
What happens when the state starts telling you can't do bus routes a certain length and we have to, you know what I mean?
You mean duration?
Yeah, like, so yeah, you do that and you'd be like, oh yeah, this will be great. We can like, and then all of a sudden the state's like,
So
You
far,
need
they
to-
have had some hands off on that, other than saying you must provide transportation for, those who request the
And
transportation.
that snapshot's in like October, right?
Yes. Yep,
And
1
look-
week snapshot of actual ridership on October. And that's what they base their funding on, support for you, but not what you're required to do. So it's sort of a lapse in what they do for funding, which is why we're getting a lot more precise on what we're seeing in actual ridership. You may have already started receiving calls because we did go ahead and consolidate a route with a impromptu retirement that came earlier. So I know I've received quite a few calls. We did some consolidation to try to see how that might work. It did add not too much, about 15 minutes or so to a route, but that can be a big difference for parents and small children who are, 4 miles away and still have to wait an hour and a half for their child. I mean, it's just the way the routes sometimes can have to go.
What's the longest route right now?
82 minutes.
What's the shortest?
The shortest is about an hour. Yeah.
Yeah, this is
I
captured.
think that's very good. I've
Thank
lived
you.
in places where you have to, I mean, I don't even know what hour it was. I was putting James on the bus when we lived in South Carolina. But they did double routes.
Yep. A lot of school districts are
So-
doing double routes.
So I know he was on very early as a young child.
One of the main cost savings that the school district has implemented is they have K through 12 on a bus. Many localities will have an elementary school bus, a middle school bus, a high school bus. The kindergarten kid is not with the senior. Well, probably aren't a lot of seniors on the bus, but
There can be.
here, a single bus runs that route. And it's one of the reasons why when you looked at the presentation from last year, that our actual costs are half of what some other districts are, because we're running those buses the most efficient possible way they can be run.
Yep.
It's still very costly, and buses are expensive, and they don't last very well, beyond 15 years. If you do, then particularly on some of our roads, they're getting shaken and beaten and battered every time they're out. So gives Chris and Al plenty to do.
We were happy to see Horton Hollow and Pullins Bluff in there. We're like, yes, that will kill your bus. I drive that route sometimes, I'll tell you what.
I think somebody that lives back there describes it as a rough cut.
Dr. Groves, have you ever seen averages of bus routes in Virginia, especially for rural counties? Or
Not-
that doesn't really matter. I mean, you can spend, it can take you like in Fairfax, like 45 minutes to go like 3 miles sometimes. So,
It
but
does.
have you seen any?
It just varies so much. I do see, and we follow quite a bit of feeds with the other transportation departments in other rural areas, and I know just our neighboring county and Page County really struggles with transportation. If you follow them every day, this bus is delayed, this one's double running, this one's doing something. I mean, it's a challenge to get to all the remote places and really streamline and be as efficient as possible. I'll tell you what, Chris King has done an awesome job running every single route. He is a master at trying to really streamline some of these things. So it's great as a former student to see
Only
someone so
right-hand turns.
successful. He's strict with it too. No, you can't do that. But he's done a great job. And we were at 18 routes back when I started 8 years ago, and we're down to 14 right now. So trying to streamline as much as possible and no route over 82 minutes.
What are the fuel efficiencies on the new buses that we're looking at?
Come on, Chris.
Yeah.
The average probably best you can get is probably 10 miles a gallon. On
And how about the buses now that we're running the 2008 Bluebird?
So that 2008 Bluebird, you're probably around 6 or 7, and actually that's 17 years old, and that engine's been replaced, so these Cummins are a lot more reliable. So 17-year-old bus. That 1 year where they bought 5, that's really gotten us behind schedule there.
Any significant difference between a 77 and a 65
Only
on operating costs?
Operating costs, about the same. All use same filters. We try to make everything universal, same parts, mostly overall, unless the emission stuff has changed. But the overall average cost is all about the same. It's just the length of the buses.
How much, yeah, that was my question. How much longer is the 70, I mean, not that it matters, but do you have someone to drive them? You know, this,
So 65 has 11 seats per side of the bus. 77 has 13. So it's just 4
It's 44
Okay.
feet long.
Yes.
And they're kind of like 3 butts in a seat, and it's not real numbers.
Yeah, 3 small little children
Yeah.
per seat. That's the way they're
A 12-year-old female, to be exact.
Do we have any 77s now?
We do. We have.
And don't have any trouble turning around on our back roads and
No.
stuff?
They do get a little tight in small turnarounds, but most we had no problems at all.
So 2 buses this year.
So that's the question ultimately is, what does the board want to do relative to investment into the buses to try to catch up? And then what will the FY26 budget include? Right now, I know there's a gap between the superintendent and the school board's request and what has been presented by the county administrator. And then you're gonna have a public hearing, you'll hear from a lot of people. So will there be enough money, targeted money in the FY26 budget to buy a bus in FY26? And then is there an appetite to purchase 1 or more buses or at least order them in FY25? And Bonnie made a very good point that if they're ordered today, they'll likely be an FY26 purchase. They're just not, you just don't get them off the shelf.
6 to
It's
8
gonna
month
take
wait
6
time.
right. So, but getting that order in is important to get that going, and that would take a commitment from the board to apply some of, this fund balance. It's unassigned today, it would then become assigned.
If we order today, is the price locked in?
Yes.
That's in the contract?
And these are state contract,
It's a state
Prices.
bid contract,
Okay.
yep, yes,
and it'll be rebid whenever it comes up, and that's when it'll change.
right.
Weren't these buses like $80,000 in 2017?
Just 6.5 years ago, yeah.
I mean,
63% in 6.
it's like,
Crazy.
that's just hard to wrap my mind around.
And it does make me nervous that we're falling behind. I feel like it was when Mason was in kindergarten, we bought, I mean,
Seven or something.
seven
It was a
or
lease
8
purchase.
buses.
It was a lease purchase in 2015,
So-
5 of them, yeah.
We would discourage the board from trying to,
Yeah.
A, why are you financing these buses at a lease purchase at rates that are probably not favorable when you have cash? And B, we really want to encourage the board to get onto that routine cycle. If they're 14 or 15 years is the length of time, and you have 14 or 15 routes, it just makes sense to buy one a year.
Okay.
Do you need direction from us today?
If you're in a position to make a decision on a number of buses you'd like to purchase, to authorize to be purchased, out of cycle, say, using your balance, I would like a motion to that end to assign a certain amount of your unassigned fund balance for this purpose, and then we can have the commitment to borrow, or to order the buses, and then you will eventually see this change in the FY26 budget when it's adopted.
And I'm sorry, remind me, what did you say the buses are now? Cost 77?
152,000 for a 77 passenger and 146 for 65.
So does it make sense to do 2 this year?
We would.
And then we need 2 more.
We are 4 behind. We're testing out one route down, which would put us 3 behind. So we're still getting feedback about that.
So if
To
you
see how
have,
that goes,
if you buy 2, you'll be 2 behind. And if
Yeah.
you buy one in the FY26 budget, naturally, you'll still be 2 behind. And then you'll have to think about opportunities when you want to either shed a route, making you go from 2 to 1 behind, which they're testing out right now, or allocate, or assign more fund balance to not be 2 behind.
Well, then I'll make a motion to allocate enough funds, that times 2?
No, I think if you say a 77 and a 65. or-
77 and a 65 for
Passenger bus.
FY26? Or how do I need to phrase this motion?
Assign, I would say, allocate fund balance for those 2 size buses.
So I want to make sure that I'm clear.
Whatever she says.
We had the conversation at the budget work sessions about the construction dollars or capital dollars coming from the state, and needing to be able to fund 1 bus in fiscal '26 with those state dollars. That's in the fiscal '26 budget.
Okay.
Are we talking about, on top of that one, another 2
Yes.
coming from the fund balance today?
Which includes the 165 from the tax.
161 from the tax.
Yes, ma'am.
So we're talking, so what
So
are we
3
talking?
total is what we're talking, 2
So in my
now.
school proposal, I have 1 bus in the state modernization infrastructure line.
26.
However, in the past, we've had to move that funding, which prevented us from getting a bus in the last couple of years. So should that stay whole, I could still purchase a bus in FY26.
I'm confused.
So let me say it this way. They only stay 4 behind if they buy one every year.
Right.
Into the future. So if they buy one in '26, then they will remain 4 behind regardless if you take no action today, okay?
Right. Including the one that's in the budget right now.
There's one in her budget which requires $500,000 more than has been allocated to the schools.
Okay.
State funding, $200,000 of her state funding must be directed to certain expenses of which buses are a part. There has been ways over the last several years when budgets were tight that the schools have been able to allocate some of that $200,000 to in-year operational maintenance type things instead of a bus. There are also tools at the board's disposal that you could appropriate to only the transportation category of school funding that would reinforce your intent that some of that money go towards a bus. So there's no guarantee until everything is done and the school board budget is adopted that you know that a bus is going to be purchased in FY26. You will definitely know that if you allocate funds from your undesignated fund balance today for one or more buses, those one or more buses will be purchased that start to resolve the, being behind by X number
So I
of
want to get
buses.
2 buses, so I'm going to make a motion to then allocate enough. What can I use, a dollar amount?
The amount of money needed
amount
for
of
the
money
77 passenger bus and
65
65 passenger bus
65
using
passenger bus.
undesignated fund balance.
Using undesignated fund balance.
Okay.
Thank you all for this team effort.
Yes. I'll second that.
And that's separate and apart from the bus that the school has in its own budget.
26, and do you have a budget in your 25 budget, this year's budget, that you're naturally going to buy? Or is that part of the 4-year bond?
That's part of it.
Right,
We have to do
okay.
Okay, and are we making it part of the condition that, because this was my idea when we heard the tax sale amount, is that filled the hole nicely. Can we say that the funds from the tax sale should specifically be used for this, or is it all in one pot? It doesn't make any difference.
It's fungible, I mean, they're all the dollars kind of mixed together at that point, but if you want to put that in the motion.
I just think people are gonna say, why,
Yeah.
what possessed you to think you could afford to buy a bus? And I wanna say, as a supervisor, that we had an unanticipated revenue stream develop that was brought to us, that was time sensitive. And knowing that the schools have this need, and we can meet this need with those dollars, that's what we did. And so I would like to make that equation.
Include that. Yep.
Yes, because I don't think it's really healthy that the board get in the practice of buying buses for the schools. But if that's what it takes to make sure these dollars get spent on buses, then I'll do it at least this year. I won't be here to do it next year, but I think it's good practice.
Yep.
Because it is a big mix at the schools, and it's easy for monies to get in other projects or devoted to other needs. And if the board needs to say, we are buying a bus every year to ensure that we get a bus every year, then I think that we should do that. And I think
Totally agree.
that getting this unanticipated revenue stream has really been an answer to this big problem in a small way. But that's how you solve big problems, is one step at a time.
So
Is that a
a
second?
possible amendment would be something like a 77 and a 65 passenger bus from unassigned fund balance using in part tax sale revenue of approximately $161,000.
Yes, please.
Van, are you okay with that edit?
Yep.
Yep. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I do just want to say that since I've been on the board, we've never fully funded the schools. So I don't think that you guys putting off purchasing buses is your fault. I'm not saying that you're saying that, but I feel like it's our responsibility, because we're the ones that allocate money, to make sure you guys have what we think is the amount of money that you need. And when you guys come to us with a budget that says, here's what we need, and since I have been on this board, we've never given you that amount, I commend you for what you've done. So thank you. So I think about it differently.
I don't want to argue about it, but I would also just say, I have people tell me all the time, how in the world did the schools get $300,000 to infuse into the broadband project? And if I know that that money could also have been spent on buses, and now we're behind 4 buses, that seems to me like there's a direct line that that money maybe could have and maybe should have been spent on buses. And I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just saying that smart decisions one day make for smooth roads later, and maybe we don't have to make these kind of decisions in the future.
I say we make the best decisions we can with the information we have at the time. So I think today we're making a very good decision with the information we have at the time, so.
And I would like to make sure that we put this down each year for including a bus, so we don't get behind.
Well, it's a good way to save money in the future, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's what I'm hearing. I mean, it just makes sense.
It's essentially a line item for the schools that we think is important,
Yeah.
and we don't want to do a full line item, but this is an important line item.
And if I could just respond to one thing, in our proposal each year, it was our intention, and you can look back and through all of our budget reports, that infrastructure modernization state funding line always be used for a purchase of a bus. However, during budget proceedings and things, we've had to move to other capital infrastructure related needs that are recurring as a result of not having the full funding in those areas. Either way, if you want to put it in the infrastructure line, make that whole, we can fund it that way. If you want to put, it doesn't matter to us, we can give you the contractor vendor agreements, you can write the check yourselves as long as we can get those buses. But I really appreciate the dialogue and all the consideration. The ESSER funds, we did purchase one bus with those. At the time, we were dealing with a digital issue during COVID, that there was a huge push to try to figure out a way to get broadband to the home, even in our own ESSER dollars. That's why it was such a promoted and permissible use of those funds at the time, like you said. But looking back,
Yeah, well, I mean, it's all about working together to move forward on a common goal, right?
Correct.
I mean, for real. I mean, I value education. I think this is good. Now, we all know that, just we're not made of money, and money doesn't sit under trees and bags.
If only.
So this is hard, and our job is the hard job, which is doing the one thing that nobody likes. And I can sit here and tell you I did not get elected to raise taxes or collect more money from people. But the reality is that it just keeps going up in ways that I don't know how a bus went from 80. When I saw that number, I mean, I thought last year it was 129. And it's like, where does that even
last year,
happen?
a year before 120.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, so it's tough.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 No opposed.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much. Really, thank you.
Thank you.
Let us know when you're going to christen them.
We'll bring the champagne.
Right. Non-alcoholic, of course.
Non-alcoholic champagne.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, courthouse construction cost.
All right. The circuit court clerk brought to mine county attorney's attention that there is a fee, another court fee that the county could levy if authorized by the state, which is $3 per case.
You just said if authorized by the state.
That's correct. Which if you run the numbers, about $9,000 a year, which not a lot of money, but every dollar is important. And basically, this is based on Virginia Code Section 17.1281C, that the DHCD has to inspect our courthouse and agree that it couldn't simply be kind of upfitted to meet all their modern standards. There's little doubt that we can't pass that test, but we would have to reimburse them as a DHCD, DGS, General Services. We would have to reimburse their staff to come out and validate our checklist and report that we send to them, which might be a few $1,000s, which means the first year our net would be less than $9,000. The code is kind of silent on how long you can apply this fee. I asked the question, nobody really wanted to answer or knew the answer, and so I state claim that, well, we could charge it as long as we had active debt service on a new courthouse, which would probably be 30 years, at which time nobody would remember that we started doing the $3, and the state law might change by then anyway. So this agenda item is simply me seeking your concurrence that we should go through the process. I should submit the self-review to the DGS, invite them up here to look at our courthouse, reimburse them for that, and then ultimately this would end in an ordinance amendment to Chapter 103, which is your fee section, which would be simply to add this $3 fee next to your courthouse maintenance fee and your library law fee.
I will move to authorize staff to apply to the Virginia Department of General Services seeking authorization to levy a $3 court fee as set forth in Virginia Code 17.1-281 to authorize the advertisement for an ordinance amendment public hearing for same upon certification by the Virginia Department of General Services.
Thank you.
That's the motion, I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
So it's only just increasing something we already charge from
It's adding
$2 to $3.
it's a new, well, there's various fees. You have the courthouse security fee, which is $20, and then you have these other fees that I just showed in the ordinance. You have the courthouse maintenance fee that's $2, and law library fee, which is $4, but only in civil actions. And of course, the courthouse upgrade fee can apply to civil actions if the amount is less than $500, and these are just rules in the state code. So it's just another fee that if you come to this room for another reason, when you exit downstairs, they're going to ask you to pay.
Okay.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Can we take a short recess?
We'll take a 5-minute recess. 3:46.
Thanks. I'm always happy to ask. I usually need it too.
The sole use of the structure, period. Right? You can't have retail below, you can't have a dwelling above, you can't rent out your basement as a tourist home and live in your house. You can't have an apartment upstairs and a tourist home downstairs. Any combination whatsoever. Is that what you would like to see? Perhaps you would want it to be the only transient lodging use or dwelling use in a structure, but other uses could be there. For example, you could rent out the apartment over top of your retail store as a long-term or short-term rental. Would that be okay? Or maybe the combination of a transit use and dwelling, long-term use, is okay, and you just don't want a tourist home to be in the same building as another transient lodging use. So you can't have the tourist home upstairs and the tourist home downstairs, which that really, if you are trying to do that, you're turning it into a bed and breakfast and subverting the rule that requires you to have an on-site resident manager. So I would think that C wouldn't apply. And so this is intended to stoke some conversation among the board of what you actually want to see in the community to help drive that clarification and then ultimately modify the definition as it occurs in your ordinance so it is clear, so there aren't questions. And the time to do that is now, because the Planning Commission, as you're aware, is working on the full range of transient lodging uses and the special requirements that go with them. And so if you're going to be holding public hearings to modify other parts, now is the time to hold a public hearing to clarify this part.
I think we're getting close to being done. At least that's what I thought till this came up. So I would just say that this came up largely as a result of the Weiss application that we heard last month at the Planning Commission, in which it's a relatively small parcel, a couple acres, I think, if I remember correctly. And it's zoned ag, and it has a home on it. It has an apartment in the old store, and the owners are seeking a special use permit to have an Airbnb in the store itself. And this, someone in public comment brought up this definition that it is rented in its entirely, not by lodging unit, to a single party of guests. And it seemed to fit in this instance that, you know, the unit is the old store, and so if it's being rented in its entirety and there's already long-term renters upstairs, that it cannot be permitted for this use as a tourist home. So that's the genesis of this. I would say it's my experience that people tolerate tourist homes. I don't think people particularly like them, especially if they're not managed or don't have an owner on site or management nearby, because that's always something we hear at every public hearing. Well, if you live in DC, who will be here to take care of things for you? And I can think of instances in the time that I've been on the board, where people have purchased a large home and wanted to rent rooms for Airbnb, the rooms, and told that they have to rent it in its entirety. There's also some future projects in the works that contemplate more than one tourist home in a building. To my mind, the tradition has always been one in the building takes up the whole building, with the exception of what Mr. Parrish always used to say on the board, is if the owner lives on site and should want to rent out a part of the house, that's a way for them to realize some additional income. But we work and function as a board, so I'm open to the board's thoughts and want ultimately to bring back work product from the planning commission, which is agreeable to the board.
Thank you for discussing this. So on A, it's how it says must be the sole use of the structure. That does not include, and is it meant to exclude other than domicile?
Yes, not a dwelling. These are just thrown food for thought, really, but.
Oh, no, I'm wondering, it's just like, just a suggestion, but what I mean by that is that, because right now we have, at least I think I'm aware, that we have houses that people live in, but then they vacate to rent them out.
Right, or that families own and it's their familial home or their longtime place that they grew up, and all of the family members have moved away, so they'll come back and have family vacations in the house or time in the house, but during those other periods they rent it out to defray the costs associated with maintaining the property.
You're just being concurrent use.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
maybe the word concurrent needs to be, but.
Yeah, like other than domicile must be used for the sole use of the structure or whatever.
That begs the question whether can you have, in our parlance, it's a dwelling. So can you have a dwelling coexist with a tourist home at the same point in time? Can they both be used at the same time? I think that is the question. And I don't think staff would really argue whether you have the flip-flop situation.
Right.
These months out of the year, it's our dwelling. The other months out of the year, it's a transient lodging use.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it would be concurrent for sure.
So can you, if you have a house and maybe you had aging parents, you built out an in-law suite inside, you got an ADU permit for it, can then you come in and ask for permission for a tourist home for that?
Right, yeah. I mean, I think that tempers the use. To have it's like more like a bed and breakfast, right? You actually have the owner on site. I mean, that's just kind of more of a no-brainer when we overlay the other requirements, which is the 10 acres and type 2 road, if it's on all that kind of stuff. Having an actual owner in the house seems to me even better, because then you've got eyes and you've got ears. But then you don't have to make the distinction that this is exclusive of dwelling.
Right, I was trying to drive whether it was okay, what combination is okay? Transient use with a dwelling unit? Transient use with a dwelling unit and any other retail, commercial use? Transient use only by itself in that structure at a given point in time? What uses are compatible and should be allowed at the same time?
Right.
A strict reading of the definition now, without paying attention at all to the bed and breakfast definition, lends itself to that of A. If you're going to have a tourist home, it is the only use allowed in the structure at that time. Maybe it's your house on Wednesdays, but on Saturdays it's a tourist home, fine. But they can never coexist at the same time. And if the board is comfortable with that, then I think some clarification should be added to the ordinance to make sure everybody who reads it understands that's the point. But if the board is of mind to say, well, it's okay to have a tourist home over retail or a tourist home under a residence, then the wording should be modified to reflect that.
So I do agree that I think, this is what I should say, I think that we should have the concurrent use with the owner because there's no way to police it anyway, and I think people are doing it anyway, and it makes total sense to have an owner there. It's better for the neighbors to have an owner there, in my mind. So we wouldn't want to disallow that. There are retail by right we have to include. For instance, farm stores. things like that, cottage industries, that is truly a thing. Also, and and this would be part of the permitting process, is like someone's gonna come in at some point that's got a distillery by right on a farm and wants to now, because there's an AG opinion out there that supports this, that they want to be able to, but they're asking, have an Airbnb. And that person might be attached to the same building that is retailing.
Yeah, so if there is a by right use, it doesn't necessarily allow them to have a special exception use as well.
No,
So they might be able to have retail
I'm aware.
in the farm area, but it doesn't mean that the board has to authorize them to have a tourist home.
I'm just saying that I think that we should include that as a broader discussion, because those people have that by right. So I wouldn't want to put somebody in violation by doing what they're allowed to do just because they want to do this other thing, but then you would then say this is a permissible use, so we're going to give you a special exception. That wouldn't make any sense to me. That's just my thinking. I don't know what you guys think.
Outside of an AG opinion, which we, leave this
I didn't
rabbit
bring
hole,
that
we don't want to go that far. Nobody in the county outside of the commercial areas has a by right ability to have a short-term rental. So in ag or residential, they're all special exceptions. Nobody has a by right to that use.
Totally.
So are certain people excluded from that if they want to do that in the same building as some other use? And that is the question. Should they be excluded? And should these uses be exclusive? We've had conversations, we don't want to have this use all over the place soaking up what could be long-term rentals.
So what I'm saying is that like, I think it's really interesting. Imagine you've got someone who's got an orchard and they have a building that's got an apple packing shed in it, out of which they sell apples, and they want to put an apartment in there. I think that could be an appropriate use, and now it's got two concurrent uses.
Yeah, and that's actually happened in the time, in the last couple of years at one of the wineries in the county. They have a room that was a long-term rental. They came in and applied for it to be a short-term rental. Everybody looked at it and said, it's a no-brainer, makes sense, do it. It is not the only use in that structure.
Right.
And I think we looked at it at that time that it is, that's not what this meant. It means you can't have multiple lodging units in the building and make a tourist home, make a bed and breakfast that needs an on-site manager turn into, well, it's not a bed and breakfast, it's just 5 tourist homes.
Right. Yeah.
To me, it's all about kitchens and bathrooms. When you start adding kitchens and bathrooms, you're creating you're creating dwelling units where people will live separately in duplexes or whatever you'd like to call it. Once you start to install those and make separate living areas, you're creating patterns for future use.
I know traveling around Ireland, the pubs, just about all of them have rooms upstairs so that you can book your room, have a good time at the pub, and go upstairs. And there were times I was looking for the tavern to have the chef or someone be able to live upstairs, because that would have been a great benefit. I never got to it, but I do think you can have both in a business atmosphere.
In a long-term rental, a combination of commercial uses in a commercial area where they're all by right, I think those would be allowed. But as soon as you decide you want to rent it short-term, it's not necessarily allowed. And if it was, as far as the zoning use, it had a P instead of an SE, then you would come to this definition and say, can I do it? It's an entirety, so what does that mean? Could your old restaurant rent out upstairs as a single room?
Yep.
So getting ahead of that, it was like basically one structure should not have, as compartmentalized as that structure gets. We don't want to turn it into a Purple Martin house. You don't want to have multiple Airbnbs in different sections of it, because then that creates a bed and breakfast.
You're basically turning
or
it into
motel.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think that was the intent and the distinction between these two things. But when you read the tourist home definition just by itself,
Yep.
it certainly paints itself to be the only thing in the structure. And that's the fact that there's a debate even here, what does it mean, suggests that the word should be tweaked to make sure it reads what the board and community thinks it should say. Which the planning commission can, wordsmith. Ms. Smith thought it was important for the board to weigh in before the planning commission got it, particularly so that after the planning commission does their good work and it comes to the board for a public hearing, you look at it and you say, whoa, why did you do that?
what does the planning commission think about concurrent uses of the kind you've been speaking of, so people living there?
I think those are all fine. I think this really, to cut to the heart of it, do you want to see more of these less of these or about what you have been seeing?
Tourist homes?
Yes.
I mean, I agree with you that, I mean, you know, nobody ever comes up to me and says, hey, we should loosen the restrictions on this. But at the same time, I do think that, you know, making it work so that we can keep generating money is a
That's
good idea.
exactly right. It's a necessary evil to generate revenue.
Yeah.
We police the conditions as best we can for all parties involved, and hopefully at the end of the day, come up with something that floats.
I mean, I literally had someone today who I know call me from your district to talk about something else, and then they literally were like, what are we going to do about here?
That there's too many of them?
Yes, and I was like, well, you know, and so we just sort of had a good discussion about it. But I do think that the concurrent use with somebody living there makes a lot of sense. So I don't know if that's, we can clarify that with some language.
So transient and dwelling in the same structure concurrently sounds like it might be okay.
Because it definitely can, because but let me ask you a question. How can you make that distinction when somebody's, that's where they're domiciled? Because that is the concurrent use of that thing.
Mm-hmm. That's the principal use, right?
Yeah, but that's a concurrent use. Just because they're not there doesn't mean that they're not using it for that Sunday.
Sure,
But that's all so that's the only distinction I'm making. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, they're registered to vote there.
Yeah.
Sheriff shows up there.
Well, I think if it's mutual, if it's
That's
the
where they live.
if the exact
But
same
they're also-
space is used by both parties, then I guess they're mutually exclusive.
But that's
if
what I
it's-
mean by concurrent. It is concurrent.
Yeah,
So that's
I
all
mean
I mean.
in time, and I imagine it'd be totally separate spaces, but you know, not necessarily. And those are not preferred by most Airbnb people, and VRBO says that we don't do that. You know, you get the whole house. You're not just in somebody's
Over
basement.
site.
Right.
But Airbnb does do it.
Does do it, yeah.
They'll do a
Oh, yeah.
Couch.
pantry.
Yeah.
They'll do
Yeah.
a couch. They'll do a yard.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
Yeah, and that's not what we want. But I do think, because I know that we do have folks that do live there, I wouldn't want to put them in well, they have different permits. They'd have a permit under this, but I just wouldn't want to put someone in violation for like getting a permit and then living in their own house.
No, I don't think they, I mean, it would
That's all I
be,
mean.
the clarification in the ordinance would be that it's okay to live in a house and rent out part of it. The tricky part, and I think Ms. Smith brought this up, is it's a transient use today, but it's a non-transient use tomorrow, and now you've got a long-term rental and a dwelling, and that kind of sounds like a duplex, and, you know, we have a different process for that if you want to be able to get that on your property. And you can get approval for a transient use and not for, you know,
Well, so hold on a second. What was that? A duplex is different. So an Airbnb is a license. It is not a property right. So it's very different. It's not a lease. It's very.
Oh, I agree.
So you see the
But if
difference.
I'm talking structure, you make a
Yeah.
building in a use and the basement has a bathroom and a kitchen and all these things, and you can rent it out for less than 30 days, and next month you come back and say, you know what, the short-term rental market's not doing very good, I'm gonna rent out for longer than 30 days.
Right.
Well, that's not a by right use. And so, you know, it just
Right.
turns into a
Yeah,
weird
yeah.
enforcement mechanism
Yeah.
or to tell somebody, well, you can rent it out short-term, but you can't rent it out long-term, which is kind of silly.
Well, it grants like I was saying, it's a license. It's like a hotel. That's what an Airbnb is. Like that person doesn't have a right to be there. If you breach it, you might owe them contractual damages, but they don't get to be like you would with a lease.
Now
You
you're
can't kick me off the
talking like
property.
a law student.
Well, there you go. But there's a functional difference there in the sense, and that's why I keep bringing this up about
Yeah.
the concurrent use, is that I do feel like we would want to encourage somebody who maybe has like a house that has an apartment over here. They want to live here. I don't think it's a terrible idea if they've got 25 acres and they're maybe not in conservation but ag or whatever, and then they want to Airbnb this, like that seems pretty reasonable.
That's come up, and
Right.
you've approved that.
Yeah.
Millers did
But
that.
to
Separate
clarify
structure,
language would be
it's
fine.
a second, it's
Yeah.
not another dwelling on that parcel necessarily. It's a short-term, you know, rental on that property. Another dwelling would be a separate permit that they could seek. Arguably, the same new structure could accommodate either.
Is it important, do you think, that the on-site resident be the owner themselves? Or could it be a combination of a long-term rental and a short-term rental? I think people would prefer an owner.
Yeah, I agree with that.
100%.
That was, and no on retail, it seems like what I'm hearing.
No, I would say no non-by right retail.
Okay, by right retail.
Well, so you guys see what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah.
and I've had folks from the Wakefield district ask me that they've got orchards and they've got buildings and they do things in those buildings that they've been doing for generations, and I wouldn't want them to then be like, well, I can't have this retail arm in a place where now the house is attached because that's where we sell all the apples.
And the by right
I just want to make
retail-
sure that that's clear.
By right retail helps with your farm,
Yeah.
winery, farm
Or just any
orchards.
ag, yeah.
And it also helps with your commercial areas where those are by right as well.
And so then if someone's having by right retail like that, one Airbnb unit or tourist home unit in combination with that retail?
Well, I think that would be clear. Now, could you do a bed and breakfast with a retail component? I mean, now you're talking about probably accessory use. I got a bed and breakfast, I have a resident manager, and over in that corner I sell stuff.
Well, so
Right?
that is
That's
Hopkins
that's
ordinary.
probably, that's
They
accessory
have that.
use, right? At that point.
Yeah.
But I don't think you could ever have, I don't think the board should contemplate ordinances that would allow more than one tourist home in the same structure.
Right.
Because that is
Yeah, I
subverting
agree.
the intent.
Totally agree.
That's
Totally
a
agree. That converts it
disaster
to a
waiting to
B&B.
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, yes, I agree.
Well, good. It sounds like
Okay.
we're all singing from the same hymnal.
Yep.
And we're heading in an equal or slightly more restrictive direction. And that's what I think I needed to have cleared up.
Perfect.
Excellent.
All right, well, you got that one cleared up. Let's move on to another one.
I'll just give that same speech I just gave.
That's you want more or
I
less?
think we're heading in a equal or slightly more restrictive direction.
So the Board of Supervisors for many years has had section 17041, your zoning ordinance, temporary mobile home permits. And basically I've copied the pertinent part in bold here. A mobile home is needed while he or she is constructing, reconstructing, remodeling his or her intended permanent dwelling and will be immediately and irrevocably revoked, redundant, upon issuance of the final occupancy permit for said permanent dwelling. You're building your house, you're remodeling your house, it caught on fire, you have to rebuild it. You're allowed to have a temporary mobile home on site during that time. Could be 6 to 18 months that this is happening. You need to specifically apply for this. A number of years, this question came up, can a travel trailer be used in that context? Is there enough distinction between a mobile home, or whatever you're supposed to call them now? I would argue, in our ordinance, it's a mobile home, because that's what the zoning ordinance definition says, and that's what it says throughout. So the planning commission could change that too if they want to. Is there a distinction between that thing that you conceive, or a travel trailer, or recreational vehicle that drives itself around that you conceive? County attorney opined some time ago, there was no really light between those two things in practical sense. And so either are allowed for this purpose. That doesn't seem to follow the exact written code. That the last sentence of the definition for travel trailer today states that that a mobile home is not a travel trailer. But he came to his own conclusion, and that is what it is. So this has come up recently because in changing all of the lodging uses, the transient lodging uses, including travel trailer parks and tent campgrounds and all those sorts of things, it was staff's recommendation to change the name of travel trailer park to recreational vehicle park. Both of those terms are defined by state code, and recreational vehicles includes a number of subsets of types of units, of which one is travel trailers and camping trailers and all these different things. And so the recommendation was to have a recreational vehicle park. Fine. So what about that last sentence of the current definition of travel trailer park where it says these things should not be construed to be mobile homes? And there were questions that came up at public comment that, well, if you get rid of the definition of travel trailer park and you get rid of that one sentence, then that's going to mess up 17041. And I think that's a valid point. You shouldn't be regulating what is allowable through 17041, temporary mobile home permits, through the definition. So My recommendation to the Planning Commission and the board is, if you want recreational vehicles to be allowed during these periods when somebody is building or remodeling their home, state that in 17041. Okay, and so that means you could have a very simple changes within 17041 and state that for the purposes of this section only, the definition of mobile homes shall include recreational vehicles, or for the purpose of this section only, the definition of mobile homes shall exclude recreational vehicles. And so really it's the pleasure of the board on whether somebody is allowed to use one of these things when they're to live in while they're building or remodeling their home.
Great idea.
A or B?
A.
More restrictive?
What my confusion is for the purpose of this section only, what is this going to confuse if we say yes here, but no in other places? That's
Sometimes we don't know, and that's just a way
Yeah.
from doing damage downstream.
got to pass it to figure out what's in it.
Only here. This is one time.
Manufactured homes are interesting, particularly in state law. They are by right use in agriculture for a main dwelling that the state has told you. And so that is often interesting. So what this section does is it allows someone to have one while they're building or remodeling their house. I would argue that it is highly unlikely that someone would go through the expense of purchasing a manufactured home to install to the building code on their property while they're building a house.
Doesn't that require a pad?
Well, I mean, not a pad, but it has to be anchored to the ground and, you know.
At least 8 cinder blocks.
8.
Well,
Thank you.
You know, hurricane straps and helix piles and everything. So there's probably not a lot of that happening anyway, which is fine. If that's the board's intent to say, if you're really in it and you're gonna move a manufactured home onto your site and install it the proper way and do all those things, you can do it for these periods of time if you come in and ask for a permit. Now, if you think that when your house had a fire and now you immediately have to do something, it's okay to bring the camping trailer in, set it next to it, and put in a temporary electrical service, and now you're living in that camper for a number of years, like, you know, FEMA trailers are done across the country when there are natural disasters. Arguably, you cannot do that here, if not for the interpretation from the county attorney. So this is another one where there's an interpretation that's not clear. It would be awfully nice if it were made clear.
I agree with Van.
Yeah, it makes total sense. A lot of people have recreational vehicles now, and I would want to facilitate, especially with how expensive building is these days. I mean, if someone buys a piece of property, I mean, it seems nuts to not allow them, especially with the kinds of recreational vehicles you can get today for decent prices. Like, it's a great idea.
But this does not allow somebody to just get a camper and put it on their vacant property and say, someday I'm going to build a house here.
Of course not. They have to apply for a permit and get
Okay.
it. It's just, to
Yeah.
your point, I mean, who's going to go through getting a manufactured home or a mobile manufactured home? Do you need
Okay.
any?
I don't think, I mean, this is
No.
really information for Ms. Smith to bring back to the planning commission to help guide them on what might be acceptable to the board when it eventually gets here.
Great.
One question that the last round of discussion begs, and it's not on the agenda, but bear with me, I think it can be brief, is since an ADU was brought up, and we have seen instances of people coming in and requesting permits to turn what was permitted as an ADU into a short-term lodging rental. Is that like, would you all be interested in carving that out like guest houses? Like in no instance shall a ADU be converted to a short-term rental? Because to my mind, those ADUs should be a very restrictive permit in that we are recognizing for people living on the property that this is a benefit and wanting to have it as a benefit for the people that live there. I think if we don't carve it out, what we may be creating is more and more short-term rental lodging in combination with family homes, which is sort of an increase in the intensity on that parcel.
So
It is an increase.
The market saying it's really hard to get a tourist home permit but I think I can convince the board to give me an ADU permit that's 200 feet from my dwelling, and my real purpose is to do that, have my brother live in it for a year, and then I'm gonna kick him out and start renting it short term.
Well, and we don't police who's living
No.
in there, and it doesn't have to be a family member anymore. And at the end of the day, it builds value for the homeowner, which is a great thing, and I have no problem doing that. But it can be, you know, an attractive nuisance for the neighbors. in
The
some
only
instances.
check is that 200 feet from the principal is, I think the board felt that there's some, having that other dependent structure so close would be somewhat of a chilling effect on people's interest to have a tourist home. Although you just had a conversation about somebody doing it in the basement, so if somebody does it there, 200 feet sounds great.
Right.
But I mean, this is interesting because, that's a really interesting question. That'd be a special exception on a special exception.
Yes,
Anyway.
exactly right.
But, we've done this a few times with ADUs, and it's a different set of criteria that we're weighing because each one has, I think that,
You
I think
will
that's a
have to
good
answer
idea.
today.
I do think that's a good idea because it's not something that we do lightly, right? And it's
Right.
something that's incredibly tough sometimes because people live on, private right-of-ways that have 20 other people living there. And so,
And we
I
do
think
say-
it's an interesting
Sorry.
thing. Go ahead.
We do say that that right goes away if there's a sale of the property, right? So we don't have to.
Not necessarily for an ADU, because
There's a
once you build the
Building.
structure,
Yeah.
but for a tourist home, absolutely. And I would ask you to really think about the General Assembly over the last several years keeps chipping away at the corners of saying ADUs should be by right.
Right.
Yeah, it's gonna happen.
And so in that context, everybody gets an ADU, does everybody get a tourist home? It begins to get really tricky, slippery, that you need to really get ahead of.
But to your point, imagine that is by right ADUs. The closer they are to the house, almost the better.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, just a chilling
different
effect on
reasons.
whether somebody wants to do it.
Right.
Yeah. And overall impact to neighbors.
I do think we have approved quite a few ADUs over the years, and I think for the most part, they've been fulfilled with the intentions and terms that we've imposed on them. And I don't think we intend for them to become tourist homes, and I would think we'd want to carve that out. Do y'all think we should carve it out?
Excluded?
Yes, exclude it.
Yeah. I do. Yeah.
Somebody would have to come to you to ask you to do it at a later date. And
Yeah.
the question is, can you bar them from applying? Like the 2-year thing, can you bar them from applying? And that's a legal question. I'm
Well, and
not
I think
sure.
we do it with guest houses already.
Guest houses are by right, and what's the difference between a guest house and a full dwelling is it doesn't have a kitchen. And we don't say how many guest houses you're allowed to have.
Right. And no overnight.
You can cobble together a kitchen pretty easily now.
Sure,
With the tools of Amazon. It's
I
pretty easy to
I
do.
agree, and that's your, so if those.
It's crazy.
And that's complicated by the history here in the county of having, farm properties with multiple tenant houses.
Yeah.
And
What's it used?
hundreds of acres. And
Yeah.
is it a bad thing for the community that a multi-hundred acre parcel has 3 dwelling structures on it? Probably not. But it does make a difference if you have one that's 10 acres and tries to do that.
Yep.
So.
Okay, thank you for the direction.
All right, back to Bonnie. Unless she wants me to say something.
I was just gonna make the motion.
Even better. That'll be easy.
I move that the Board of Supervisors ask the chair to send the letter of interest to the Blue Ridge Cigarette Tax Board expressing our interest in imposing this tax in the coming year.
Second?
A motion, a second. Any discussion?
I just would only add that this does not mean that we're enacting the tax. We are just setting the table in case we should deny to enact the tax, that we are positioned to do so in the future.
Love it.
All right, we have a motion, a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No opposed. Castleton, John is not here.
Do you want to handle these Castleton items without Mr. Schwab? He's had some work obligations. He was hoping to be here by 3:30. It clearly hasn't happened.
How,
I can advocate for him.
okay.
if we want to move forward?
Well, I can at least provide some background, and then the board can decide what you want to do.
Maybe he'll
Yep.
show.
He's probably, he's not studying his lines because he's done for the season in 12 angry germs.
That was a great play.
So Castleton Community Volunteer Fire Company reached out to Mr. Carney and County Administration a month or so ago, asking if the board would be willing to help them with the purchase of a backup generator, a propane generator for their facility. He told me that one of the reasons why Serve 1405 was down for a number of months was because the water froze in the pump because there was a power outage, and it could have been avoided if there was better backup power. They have a surplus generator from the similar to the surplus equipment we used to have, but it doesn't have an automatic transfer switch, and apparently it's becoming not very reliable. They've gone and received quotes for a 48 kW propane fuel generator. This doesn't include the automatic switch gear. He said that they would be taking care of that part of it. At any rate, they've asked the board whether you would fund 50% of this. This would be similar to the actions that you took relative to life packs or non-standard items. The fire levy guidelines don't cover these out of ordinary purchases right now. The revised guidelines intend to try to cover things like this and provide some structure where the company would be intended to convey to the board why it is they can't cover the cost themselves. What are the consequences of not taking this action? None of that is in place right now in those fire levy guidelines. So this is the request. The quote they received is attached, and I don't know that they would take this quote, or they're still looking, or what's happening, but ultimately your decision would be relative to whether you would fund $14,000.
So John reached out to me and said that, so I asked him about how much money they've got on hand. They said they're saving up for apparatus. He mentioned what you mentioned before, which was that they're worried about things freezing, as did happen during, a power outage. And so as they save the little tiny money that they have for apparatus, he was wondering if the county would be available to do this for them. And so that is, and I told him I would absolutely advocate for that. If those water pumps freeze, they get very costly. And with what happened over I can't even remember when that was, January, February, they were out there plowing, no power.
The particular truck that was out of service and was in the shop was the large Army surplus truck that the county donated the plow to, and was not available during that event. They had their small utility plowing, but that big truck would have been nice to have those days.
So I'm gonna move to allocate $14,387.32 to board contingency funds and pay same to Castleton Fire Company for use to purchase and install an automatic standby generator.
I'll second the motion. They're working very hard to get back to running as many calls as they possibly can. So support from us, I think, is important to show that we want them to do everything they can. And I think a generator in today's world, especially in Rappahannock County, you've got to have a generator.
Do the other companies all have this kind of generator?
I think most all of them do. I believe Castleton is the only one without an automatic standby generator. The total cost of this is the $28,000. It's very likely that the board is going in June change the capital threshold to $25,000. This is just a few thousand over that threshold anyway.
How did everybody else fund them?
Hard to tell.
Probably just paid for them. Castleton's fund balance is pretty low, and they're saving up for apparatus, and we don't buy apparatus for the companies. And there are some companies that have more money than others, and Castleton has, through sheer grit, been able to keep going.
Yep.
And so, I mean, it's an ask, and I'm absolutely willing to support it, because I think it's not them I'm not suggesting you're saying this, but I don't see it as them not trying.
No, I don't mean to suggest that. I think the world of President Schwab and anybody that volunteers their time with any company. But to my mind, this begs the larger strategic question of what's our plan to provide these things for everyone in an even-handed way, and are we optimizing our opportunities for grants so that we're not going to the fund balance? Because judging from the financial policy we'll be enacting soon, that will be a diminishing return. And the other point that I would make, and this is tough to say, I have always supported fire and rescue 100% wholeheartedly. Strategically, whether it's been an informal or formal policy or an idea, it's always been the support of the backbone roadways of the county where the most effort should be given, 211 and 522. Among other reasons for what we've talked about several times this year, because if you have an emergency, those are most likely the folks that are going to be able to get out to you if there's any kind of an event. It's where populations are headquartered in larger numbers. So I don't have a problem with this ask, but this is part of a strategic conversation of what abilities and what resources are we positioning at different stations. And it goes back, I don't often agree with Mr. Makala, but it goes back to some of the studies we've had done. What's the big picture? Is Castleton a strategic location to respond from in a fire and rescue as a full station? Or should it maybe be more of a satellite operation that's more agile and smaller? And I know whenever we talk about fire and rescue and we talk about more here, less here, sometimes guards go up or it becomes political, and that's really unfortunate because what it should be at the end of the day is delivering the best service to people in the most logical way.
So I definitely like strategic plans. I mean, I'll just piggyback on that. You know, in my line of work, we have a 1-year, 3-year, and a 10-year strategic plan. We're always, we know where we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to be buying at any given moment. But, so I certainly would encourage all of our units to explore that or come together. That I definitely agree with that. But for the purposes of this request today, my 2 questions, this quote was March 3rd, and it says on this quote, clear as day, only good for 30 days. Only because it's towards the end of the fiscal year and I've been buying lots of things for my programs at the college. I know I've had to get a few things requoted. So I definitely would have that requoted. And then this is more a more general question, only because it says they, let's see, it says in here, they competitively bid the purchase. When they're asking us, I mean, is it fair to ask us see the other 2 quotes? Yeah, and again, it's only on the forefront of my mind because I had a couple things kicked back to me last week that said, hey, we found it 25% cheaper. Sometimes they weren't comparing apples to apples. Sometimes shared services did find it cheaper. So that's a more general question, has nothing to do, I want to help them get this, but.
I might have seen a second bid, I can't tell you.
Okay.
I did exchange a few emails with Mr. Schwab, President Schwab. And the topic of the validity of this bid did come up, and it's my recommendation to reach out to them and see if they'll hold the bid. And I can't tell you whether they agreed to do that or not.
So if you make it not to exceed $15,000, it should accommodate if there's been any increase.
Well, it would certainly allow them to fund some, if it's not 50%, it'd be 48 or enough to get them over the hump, I imagine, if you did something like that.
And this doesn't,
I can rephrase my, sorry, go ahead.
This doesn't link them to only using this company
No.
for future maintenance or anything, right?
We have a very good Generac maintenance company here in the county.
So, yeah, I mean, here's the goal. They don't want their stuff to freeze. And they need more money. And I hear what you're saying, Ms. Smith, and I agree that if all the companies want to get together and decide that they want to do something centralized, well, that's up to them. But for now, I want to help them to keep this stuff from stop freezing. John said he got a number of quotes. This was the best one. But I think that if we just limit it to 15,000, they can just deal with it and move from there. I don't want these water pumps to freeze. And I mean, that's just, I mean, when we had the snow, we all have in our magisterial districts the same amount of people. And to your point, there are concentrations of population that when VDOT goes to plow, they hit those because they get more bang for their buck.
Right.
Castleton, at my district, has no painted lines on any of the roads, as you well know.
Very challenging.
So, I mean,
But it's great for special
I'm being
exceptions.
facetious, but you get what I'm saying. So everybody's spread out. So we
Yes.
get like, nobody gets plowed back there. So I had a number of people calling me, asking me to get the county to plow more. And so I had to explain to them that their tax dollars don't realize in plowing, and if they wanted them to, their taxes would go way up. And that VDOT handles that, and that the reason that Castleton's out there is because they're good citizens and they can't run calls if those roads aren't cleared. And it took like a while to get a lot of those roads back and then cleared. But at the same time, there's no power. So if they have these like multiple things working against them, you know, I think that this is just a small thing that we can do to help them keep that bay from not freezing.
Yeah, I definitely.
And so I can redo the motion to say move to allocate no more than $15,000 of board contingency funds and pay same to Castleton Fire Company for use to purchase and install an automatic standby generator.
And I'll agree with that with my second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
So you'll see that in a future appropriation, because we'll move it from your budget to, I don't know where, capital maybe.
And we were sure that there
Fire
are big
service fund.
grants open that could cover this.
Yeah, they're going for grants for all sorts of things, RSAF grants, but they want to, they're going to be looking for ambulances and, 50/50 or 80/20 money for an ambulance, so.
Which is what, 450,000 these days?
This is unfortunately insignificant compared to those things. Okay, next item is also regarding Castleton Community Volunteer Fire Company, and as the board will recall, the county offered to all of the volunteer EMS agencies the opportunity to fall under the county's, the Rappahannock County Fire and Rescue Department EMS license. Sperryville has done that. Flint Hill has done that through other means and it continues to do that. When discussions were had in 2024, the leadership from Castleton was disinclined to do that and kept on their own course, which was fine. We told them, just let us know if your thoughts ever change. And so they have, and they've come to us and asked if they can have the same agreement that Sperryville has, and staff said absolutely. And so that agreement is before you. This basically Castleton would become a non-DERA agency, designated emergency response agency. They would still maintain an EMS license. Their members would still be Castleton Community Volunteer Fire Company members in the Office of EMS eyes. They would also be Rappahannock County Fire and Rescue Department members and fall under our license for the emergency response portion. So they don't have to change their ambulance, change the paint, change the sticker, which that opportunity didn't really present itself when we went through all this with Flint Hill because they weren't a licensed agency at all. So the fact that Castleton is a licensed agency, they will stay a licensed agency, they'll just also fall under the county's license. Mr. Goff reviewed this agreement as he did before and found it acceptable as to legal form.
Well, then I'll move to authorize the county administrator to execute the provided agreement between Rappahannock County and Castleton Community Volunteer Fire Company regarding EMS licensing and provision of pharmacy services.
I'll second that.
We do understand that they do plan to upgrade their ambulance so it can provide ALS services. I don't think it'll be staffed all the time, ALS, but they do have ALS providers who then could make that happen easier than moving drug bags from ALS 1400 onto it or different things. So
We just need to get Castleton View hard surfaced.
that's on the list.
And because of this, they'll be able to, when they get the ALS going, they'll be able to share in the pricing of
So there'll be
ALS
common drugs
and-
for Castleton, Sperryville, Flint Hill, and the county, in one drug closet, if you will, and then, you know, the problem of having to order something that has a short shelf life, but you can only get a minimum of 25 of
24,
them, but,
yep.
you know, that helps that issue some.
Absolutely.
And is there, I mean, I know this goes back a long time that I've asked for call volume and response times and the level of care required. Are you all reviewing that on the Public Safety Committee? And how is it looking for Castleton these days?
They were obviously in a transition, I think, structurally. And with the new leadership, I do believe we are seeing an increase. I can tell you the EMS side, I see working really hard, and it sounds like they're, as far as fire, they've got more people that can potentially run fire than we had seen before. So I do believe the success will bring people out, like I said with 4.
Do you think the board in full could get a briefing on this from one of the leaders? I don't often go to meetings back there. I haven't since the change.
Yep. I think they'd probably be proud to give a briefing.
And I think you're aware, that like Ms. Donahue, who, you know, saw a shortage of EMTs at Flint Hill, she took the class. John Schwab, who was the president, found
Team
the
Griffin.
shortage.
I
and
think he was the first to pass
He
it,
took the
right?
class, yeah. So kudos to John and.
I know, he's great.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, I can say that from my constituents, I mean, this is the last thing they want to see eliminated is Castleton Fire Department.
It's not an elimination question, are we building to an appropriate scale for the location? Are we optimally positioning our resources for the emergencies that we face?
Right.
That's the question.
And I agree that this kind of partnership is going to do that. And the other thing it will do is cost money. So everything that we're going to do to keep that building breathing and living is going to cost money. But if I were to even float that, hey, we're thinking about, you know.
Don't say it, because that's how rumors get started, that the courthouse is gonna get torn
That's my
down.
point.
So
So
we're
it's
not
like-
going
She
there.
just said that.
All right, so move it along.
Move along. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
On to your reports.
Woo-hoo. Board committee reports. Recreational Facilities Authority, ma'am.
So for full disclosure, I missed the last meeting. I had a class kickoff at work. However, they are in full swing fodder stack. It's going really very well. The last count I saw, we had 398 pre-registered runners, that is. And I believe there were only 428 runners in last year's race. I can't
What's the
remember.
registration up to?
398.
398?
Oh, wow.
That was pre. So
And the good thing about pre is if you don't come,
we still have your money.
get the money. Yes. So weather does not take that away.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's going very well. It's this Saturday, this coming Saturday. If any of you have not registered, come on out, run fodder stack. I love telling people it's the hardest race I've ever done in my life.
Walking it is lovely.
So.
And then your son wins it.
And yeah, and then my son got the plate for me.
At the last Regional Jail Authority Board meeting, the sheriff recalled that it was coming up and asked the inmate work crew, or the superintendent, to have the inmate work crew take care of the litter. So it's been out once already. I think they're going to hit it again this week. And then I did reach out to VDOT and ask them if they could maybe jump that up on their list of roadside tree debris from our storms.
Good.
Great.
Public Safety Committee, I don't remember if we met before or after the last board meeting?
I think after. Yes, just after.
Okay. Do you recall anything that came out of that that we need to share? It's been a while.
I don't think there's anything in particular. There continue discussions about the wrong-way drivers and the effectiveness of the median crossover signage improvements and requests for a couple more intersections to be looked at. I think that was the main thing.
Basic, yep.
And the AED program, which is a few AEDs, community AEDs have been purchased, but small steps there.
All right, Planning Commission.
We had more of a work session than a meeting with public hearings. We had a discussion on the contractor's yard, which we referred back to the board to adopt at a joint meeting in the future. And then we worked on the transient lodging amendments and also on the events that you all sent down to us. And we're going to request samples of events language and work through that.
Right, so we'd be looking for a May joint public hearing on that contractor's yard ordinance.
And we have Amosville on the schedule for I think it's Monday, April 14th? Whatever the Monday is before the regularly
I was going to say
scheduled.
16th, but
Oh, maybe you're right. Whatever the Monday is before the regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting,
you're right, 14th.
the 14th, we are doing our first listening session for the comprehensive plan at the Amosville Volunteer Fire and Rescue Station.
Excellent. That'll be great to hear what folks have to say.
I hope people come out.
You have donuts or something?
It's at 6 o'clock, if I remember correctly, so no donuts.
No donuts.
You'd have done an A-town.
Yeah, exactly.
I can speak Fire Levy Board real
Yes,
quickly.
please.
The board discussed changes to the fire levy guidelines. The Fire Levy Board reviewed them. And now the association has asked for more opportunity, and so they are going to do that. The plan is to have a Fire Levy Board meeting in May that would allow the Board of Supervisors at your June meeting to potentially adopt revised guidelines that would apply to this 6-month period that we're in right now.
Okay. Treasurer's reports. Cash flow basically says what you and Bonnie said earlier.
Yeah, it's actually, you're putting your cash to work is what that means.
Yep.
I did update the General Assembly bills. I don't know that we need to go through them with the actions of the governor. Most everything's dead at this point that was on the kind of tracking list. I think there may be the one thing that has made it through everything was signed. I mean, many things did that were of interest to us was the item regarding subdivisions, and that those are indeed a ministerial act, and that the subdivision agent is empowered to make those approvals. That was signed by the governor, so that is going to be a new law, July 1, and we'll need to reach into the subdivision ordinance, and we should make those changes so it's clear to our citizens. If we don't make those changes, it's still a law. So it's best that we try to do that. And then, so if there are, that means that the checklist, if you will, within the subdivision ordinance of what must be done in order to subdivide is really important. And it should be an objective list of things that need to be done. And a staff person should be able to review that list and say, yes, 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 whatever. When they're all yeses, you get your subdivision. And so that makes that list, if you will, it's more complicated than that, important. And so when that ordinance is revised, some attention should be given to that.
Did the private graveyard move forward?
That, I don't know, but it was carved down to only applying to Northern Virginia and not us, so I stopped paying attention to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it said it was laid on the table. I thought it was great. Some of them were passed by,
Yeah.
and some of them were laid on the table.
Right.
And I want to know what the difference is.
There is a difference.
It's the degree of insult you should take.
And the likelihood if it's ever going to come back.
Sometimes they're lightly placed on the table.
Oh, okay. Indefinitely placed on the table.
right. We went in-
Ms. Smith did reach out to me regarding the First Energy project, and that the line from Luray to Sperryville, which is the main source of power for most of Rappahannock County, serves the Sperryville transmission substation and the Aileen Road one. So I talked to them, and they are behind where they thought they were going to be. They thought they would be applying to the SCC in April. They now say that's more likely to be June. That application will include details about the type of poles and all of that is of such interest to us. They do have a website, as I think you've been all aware. Last I checked, it wasn't updated with the latest schedule, but they told me they would. So check back on that Sperryville website from time to time and see what's there.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. And I did ask for that because I think it is an important community or county touchstone to have it included. And then if there is a time whereas we want to consider action, like sending a letter or offering advice, would make it an action item on the agenda.
And they offered to be engaged again, come again to a meeting or
June or July.
whenever the
Yeah.
board wants. And
Great.
they actually expressed surprise that some other counties involved didn't really seem to be interested.
You never know.
Yep. And Ms. Comer, I let the Ed Foundation know about First Energy because of the lineman program that Laurel Ridge is about to do as another potential.
Excellent, thank
Yes.
you. Coming soon in
Yes,
September.
that's exciting. All right. Matters presented by the board.
So I had a constituent reach out to me several months ago. It may even have been before Christmas about showing our volunteers some appreciation. So there was a little back and forth about whether or not we had, as a county, showed our volunteers any appreciation over the years, whatnot. I put a tickler on my calendar to remind myself to bring it up at some point in April because October is First Responders Month and April is 6 months out. So to plan anything, I was giving myself a little bit of time. So just thought maybe if somebody can make note.
That was part of when we hired the recruitment and retention. I would have thought that that would have fallen under that because it would be a combination thank you and touch a truck event for people that wanted to come out and were interested in learning more about opportunities to volunteer. And we did that a couple of years ago. I think Mr. Polster did the food for it. We did it in October at the pavilion over at the park, and it was very well attended, as I recall, and very nice. Some people said, "Oh, they're going to grill us hot dogs to thank us for our hard service," and it was excellent barbecue, and it was a really nice afternoon. People from the sheriff's department came over and made plates to go if they were working that day. It was a very nice occasion.
And maybe it's already on somebody's radar. Like I said, I
Yeah.
put a tickler on
I
my
believe
calendar.
Darren and Kat are actually working on something.
Yeah,
Good.
great.
Good thinking, Donna.
Yeah. Ms. Smith?
And I think we've talked a couple of times today about school programs and recruitment and retention or volunteering. And I want to make sure that we are clear that we have a recruitment and retention employee, which is wonderful, and then that employee also works for the school and teaches classes in a separate capacity. And so I do think it's important to track appropriately where the leads are coming from, what's bearing the most fruit. I think I've talked enough this meeting. I'll pass.
So I've, over the past 3 or 4 months, I've gotten a number of calls from people really interested in seeing less lights in Rappahannock. People are freaked out about Clevenger's Corner, and I wanted to talk to you guys and see what the temperature is on just making our commercial lighting apply to residential for new construction. So it would basically be like what we have currently for commercial, we could just include new residential construction. And I think the reason that it's getting different is the demographic of the county is changing. I think that urbanization is something that we're definitely fighting on different levels. Also, lighting technology is way cheaper and way brighter than it's ever been. So, I mean, you know, gone are the days where you have to put expensive halogens up and you can just do it with just LEDs. So, Rappahannock to me is, I mean, there's just not that many houses out here. And so when you, at night, you know, it's just gonna start looking like Fairfax or Culpeper. There's just a lot higher density. So, I mean, I don't know what you guys think about it, but I just wanted to bring it up. I've gotten now someone called me from your district, someone called me from, we were talking about other things that just came up over the past couple of months. And so, yeah.
So the context is the commercial requires the full cutoff shielded down light.
Right, that's what we're talking about here. It's just like what RELEP does. So they'll go around, and you all know this, right? Like I don't know if you know this, like they'll go and replace lights for free. And they'll just go and then they'll put whatever the thing is called that just down shields it. So instead of it going up, it can just cascade out. And you can call them, and they've been doing this for years. So anyway, I just think it's part of Rappahannock. I mean, I just feel like dark skies, I mean, we are lucky to have a dark sky park. There are not that many. And I think it's worth looking at. I don't know, how do you guys feel about it?
I think Fauquier County just recently did something for downward shielded lighting on new builds. I'm not 100% sure. I know that it was up for discussion. And our dark skies kind of identify us. It is rather special. I've heard of a few other places that really embrace that. So I definitely think it's worth a discussion.
I always think it's interesting when I go up for those Blue Ridge committee meetings to drive down in the evening when it's dark outside and look on both sides of the mountain and look at Page County and how very bright and lit up it is, and look at Rappahannock County and see how peaceful and dark it looks. My recollection is, and this was some time ago, there was some discussion about this from people that I've heard, is that when you start telling people what they can do with their properties, sometimes you don't get what you expect. And right now people can light their property any way they can see fit. And I think what I heard was, particularly for agriculture, where you might be going out in the night and need a lot of light to do something, and maybe lights have changed and that's not a concern anymore, but you need to be able to turn on the lights and get to do what you need to do in the middle of the night, and you don't want to hurt yourself with inadequate lighting. So it's a sticky wicket when you take something from being a carrot to a stick. If you wanted to see what language was out there and bring it back, we could float it and see if it holds water.
I actually agree with you. Like, I think that, so some counties have done carve-outs. So like for ag, you can do carve-outs. So if you've got a house that's on whatever, and you could have it on 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever, you just carve it out. So there's definitely ways of doing this. There's really restrictive ways, which I don't think is going to work for Rappahannock. I don't think we need to go out and start telling people they need to change their lights on their current houses. For new construction, I just think the technology's gotten so good that, like, I'll be driving home at night from Arlington and it's amazing that I'll just start going through the counties and I hit Rappahannock County and it finally does get dark. But I have started seeing, you know, it's amazing how cheap these lights are. You can get these crazy LED lights that you can shine for like 500 yards and see like raccoons and like oak trees like way over. I mean, it's crazy. But my point is that, like, I think there are ways of doing it and to carve out stuff like that. So that people can, like, you know, if they've got whatever. I mean, the point is not to, my fear is light pollution, night light pollution. That's my fear. Because in the little village of Woodville, we're lucky. It's still pretty dark. It's still pretty dark, but
We
on the
got
edge
one real bright light in Sperryville lately. I heard about it.
Yeah, I mean, people are calling me about random different things, but, well, I don't know, if staff is willing to.
We can go
Scope
see what's
something
out there
out.
and bring in some
Scope your day.
options of what other people are doing.
Yeah, and, okay.
Yeah, I've been a fan of our dark skies since it started, and I do think it helps us stand out, another way of saying this is what Rappahannock's about. And I think it helps us stack against our comp plan and, you know, everything everybody else would love us to do. We can say, we're dark skies, we're not going to do that. And in the house that we're building, I asked about the lighting, and because I do have floodlights, so I've got to find out. They said, well, you can point them in any direction you want to, but I don't think that's the point with floodlight. You got to figure out some way that it's not going to be flooding for miles. So, and making sure everybody knows about our LEP, because I know you were talking about new builds, but we do get calls from neighbors every now and then about the light, the night light that gives people comfort. They can see, but you can down shadow or shade those as well, I think, so.
So in my mind, the way this ordinance would be for new construction, right? So if somebody has a barn somewhere, I mean, they're just gonna put a light on it, and we don't. It's like almost like it's all the things that we do, all the empowered things we can do with zoning is all about control, right? And you try to just balance what we can do to give people the ability to do what they really need to do. And so I think we can tailor this such that, like, when somebody has to get a building permit literally to build a house, it's not super restrictive. It's just that it's not going to pollute light on their neighbor's property, which I drive at night now from home from Arlington. I'm seeing new construction, and sometimes it's crazy. I have to say that Clevenger's Corner, for what I've seen at night, they seem to be following Culpeper has one. And it's not as bright as I thought it was going to be, but they haven't put in the commercial part.
I know
They
they
haven't put in the
received a lot of
retail.
phone calls.
Yeah, wow. I mean, it is bright.
No, I mean about,
Yeah.
before they built, they
Concern.
received a lot of phone calls. Yeah. All right. And the only thing I have is I was honored to be asked to be a part of the Hunt Institute Fellows Program. To be honest, I didn't know anything about it, so did a little research, but had the first, we met yesterday and today in Richmond. Great diverse group of people. I had met with Dr. Grimsley and Lisa Payne-Wells because this conversation was preschool. So all the conversation, everybody they brought in to talk to us was all about preschool and how things are going. And although the state is doing a very good job of trying to boost the number of centers and stuff, because we got everybody's got a waiting list of kids that can't get into preschool, including us. We have 151 kids currently and a waiting list. And 70% of those kids are they're from Rappahannock, so you got to expect many will go to our schools. Very good way to look at where elementary school is going to be in a few years. But great 2 days, and I was just very appreciative of Dr. Grimsley and Lisa's time, because I have to be honest, other than the budget, I haven't spent a lot of time trying to understand the business of schools. And there are so many regulations. It makes everything much more complicated in my mind than you'd really want it to be to take care of their children. But it's grown over time, and it's like you get more regs and you don't get rid of some, and it just takes a lot of time and effort for people versus actually teaching. And the daycare centers are falling out of the service because too many regs. The pay is like on average $14 an hour for somebody to work in a daycare. Ours is better than that because ours is expecting some continued education and possible degrees and stuff like that, so they do pay more. But it's just amazing to hear what is going on in the Commonwealth, and it's a little scary, I think, especially for parents having kids that need to work, how they're going to be taken care of. So I'll keep you kind of in the loop on what I learn, but it's definitely an honor. And they deal with governors and above, they deal with legislature. Their whole goal is really to educate anyone in some sort of leadership role on what is happening in the school systems and education as a whole, so.
So you're going to be reviewing the full gamut of public education? The first stop is preschool, so
Yep.
you're, okay.
Next is K through 12, and that'll be the June meeting, and it is during my board meeting, so I'll be in Roanoke, but joining from Roanoke. And then the last one is in Williamsburg in August.
Thanks
And
for
that's
taking that on,
post-education.
Yeah, thanks. That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. All right, we're going to recess until 7 o'clock.
Recess.
5:08.
Time for dinner.